Hello, and welcome to The Fool, the Philosopher.
The Philosopher
And Philosopher.
Philosopher.
The Fool and the Philosopher.
But if you live for several 100,000 years, then you're going to win it several times.
And that is the same case with the primordial soup. Yeah, possibly.
Possibly. That's one of the theories.
And the thing is, it's probably true that that would happen. But there could be multiple paths to the same thing. And also, you could have a God's hand in there somewhere, potentially. Yeah. Although, it's kind of weird, isn't it, actually, that God exists? The idea of God, I mean. Because...
Got him.
Dang, I had a slip up. Okay, fine, I admit it. You got us. All atheists are just lying. Sorry, guys, I blew it for everyone. Yeah, no, it's weird that God exists as a concept, because you would think there'd be more options than God for explaining things. Like, you could have... Well, I don't even know if I can think of them, but the fact that God is the only one that we can think of or have thought of en masse is interesting.
Well, there's a lot of gods, but they're all one of the same ideas.
Yeah, I mean, like, God as there is a creator who created things. Like, the only other alternative we have to God is science, basically. There's not really a third option out there that I'm aware of that's popular.
Well, there's combining God and science, which is basically...
Well, science does that because Sheldrake said that quote. I think I said it before on the podcast, but permit us this one small miracle and we'll explain the rest. So we have no idea how it all started. Yeah. We have no idea why it's going, but we can explain everything else.
Yes. Permit us the Big Bang just happened.
Yeah. Actually, that guy, Roger Penrose, this was ages ago. Remember when I was talking about black holes and entropy and that sort of thing? Yeah. His theory for the Big Bang is really interesting because he said that, as I understand it, because every time I've seen someone interview him, they say, so are you saying this with this theory? He goes, no. So, but as I understand it, he said, things go to an entropic state, and then the universe is just one homogeneous, lukewarm mess of particles. Yeah. And he said, a homogeneous, lukewarm state like that is no different informationally from a singularity. Which means the end of the universe could also be the beginning of the universe, or it could be the beginning of a new universe. Essentially, if the entire universe is even, right? Yeah. That means that you can describe it all as a single point, which means therefore it's a singularity, and therefore a Big Bang can happen of infinite energy.
Basically, when the universe gets to perfect entropy. Yeah. It informationally collapses into...
It doesn't even have to collapse, it just sort of...
I'm not saying it collapses, I'm saying it informationally collapses.
Yeah, from the point of view of God, suddenly his hard drive has tons of room. Yeah. Because the whole thing is just a bunch of zeros, or a bunch of ones, or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. As I understand the theory. Now, I always really confuse myself with, is entropy more information or less and everything, so... Yeah. But it is... The arrow of time is going from unlikely to likely. That's the thing that we did get down for certain. Yeah. And which is interesting, like if you, you've read The Live Ship Traders, right? Book 1 at least?
I read the start of it and it was very boring.
Do you remember Kenneth, the pirate? He was the lucky pirate? Yeah. He thought you had to test luck in order to become luckier. Yes. I wonder, let's say his existence, right? Is he sort of a time traveler because he's reversing probability in his presence? So he's making unlikely events happen, which means his presence reverses entropy, and things go from a likely state to an unlikely state. So it
depends on if luck is this force in itself you can collect, and it's out. There's an interesting line of belief you can have, which is there's probability and there's luck. Yeah. And they actually are two different entities. And so probability is just like it's chance and like, as you said, unprobable to more probable. Yeah. Whereas luck
is just beneficial things that could happen do happen anyways. Yeah. So even if it was super likely, it would still be happening to him. Yeah. He doesn't have the bad unlikely events happen to him or something like that. Yeah, I guess you could have it that way. I also wonder, like...
Luck might also just be the observation of probability based on perspective.
Okay, so entropy is defined as the number of possible movements you can make from a given substate, right? So if the universe was an even soup, there would be way more possible movements. So entropy is information.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird, because if the information was really high, you think it couldn't collapse into a singularity. But I guess that's why it's a weird theory.
But entropy is not chaos, nor is entropy order.
I think you could consider it to be...
It's closer to order than chaos, I think.
No, I think it'd be closer to chaos. Maybe. I'm not sure. I have to think about it, because more information... Like, a fuzzy screen has more information, right?
Yeah.
So that's more chaotic. Whereas a singularity at the start of the universe is a very ordered thing in some ways. If everything's a single point, there's only one way it can move, which is outward.
I guess.
So we go from order to chaos then, I guess. But that's kind of weird, because the mythological progression is from chaos to order.
Well, no, it's from order to chaos to order.
You start with mist, right? And mist is sort of a nothing, and then you go...
Mist turns into chaos.
Chaos. And then you get Gaia, which is, I guess, chaos as well.
Yeah, but if we go... Eden is order. Getting cast out is chaos. And then you're making your back way to the better Eden. So mist could be Eden.
Yeah.
Creating chaos.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. And this makes Penrose's theory really interesting, because if I haven't gotten things horribly mixed up, we're moving towards chaos that will end in absolute order. If he's right, and I'm not messing up my thoughts, and I'm not interpreting him incorrectly. Because once everything is evenly spread, suddenly it's perfectly ordered, even though it's at maximum chaos. I guess it's like if you're looking at your computer, you're playing Doom, let's say, and the screen goes a little bit fuzzy, that's chaotic. And it goes really fuzzy, that's even more chaotic. But if it turns bright white, suddenly you have order.
Yeah.
Because everything's just sort of synced up in a way. Yeah. I wonder if that's the way you could look at it.
Maybe.
I've been reading a series, I don't know if you have ever heard of it. It's called The Traveler in Black.
Nope.
It's about The Traveler in Black, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
It's a book from the 70s, and it's a really weird book, because I've been thinking about like synchronicity with it, where I've never heard of it before.
Yeah.
And it's a book that if I had read, let's say 4 or 5 months ago, I wouldn't have understood a lot of the depth in it, right? But when I got to the point where I would have understood the book, suddenly I started seeing it referenced everywhere. Like, oh, in The Traveler in Black this happens, in The Traveler in Black this happens, in The Traveler in Black this happens. And so I was like, wow, this book sounds like it ticks all the boxes. I'm going to read it. So it's a short story. So I got it, and you can get it on Amazon. You can get the complete series on Amazon for like $1 when it's on sale. Yeah. So I grabbed all 4 books, and I was reading it. And so the first story is about the traveler. Every time 4 planets align, he comes back to a specific spot. So it's about this patch of the universe he patrols. He patrols the whole universe, but it only focuses on when he's patrolling this section of the universe. And his job is to bring order to chaos. So he likes to plot out a route that will go through all the major cities of that world, then that'll take him back to where he started. So, and the worst city in that universe is right next to in that world is right next to the best city in that world. So he likes to start in the worst city and then end on a high note and come back around. So he starts in the worst city, and he goes in, and they're sacrificing everyone to their god. And the king of the city is sacrificing everyone to their god, because he's trying to bring the altar of their god to life. And he tries sacrificing a bunch of virgin sacrifices. It doesn't work. He sacrifices his favorite concubine. It doesn't work. He sacrifices the head priest. It doesn't work. He figures, okay, what if I sacrifice 100 citizens at once? Maybe that'll really get his attention. So he tries that. And the Traveler in Black comes in. And the Traveler in Black is a terrifying person you would never want to be around, because what he does is he grants wishes. So he comes to the Duke, and the Duke says, and he says to the Duke, what are you doing? He says, I want the statue to come alive. And he says, as you wish, so be it. And so the statue comes to life, and the first thing it does is it tears the Duke's head off, and then it squishes him into pulp, and it has 4 bodies on one god, and it catches the blood in its hands as an offering, and then it goes around stomping on all the priests. And so then the traveler walks off, and he goes on his long journey. And he comes to his favorite city, which is the city of rationalism, where all the people are wise and brilliant, and they trust in science, and they have improved their lives. But something's wrong with the city. There's an aura of sadness about it. And he goes and he talks to the citizens, and he says, what's wrong? And they say, we don't have a god. We have no meaning. We have no purpose. Because without God, how is there meaning or purpose? Yeah. And he said, we wish we had a god like that city. And he's like, but the god trashes and kills their people. Yeah, but at least they have meaning and purpose. It's like, but your lives are perfect. Your science has given you everything you need, and you're never hungry. You're never sick. And they're like, yeah, but we have no meaning. We want a god. And so then he says, fine, as you wish, so be it. So he gives them a god. And the god is just a bridge architect from London. So he pulls in the bridge architect, who's completely out of his depth. And then the bad city decides they'll invade the good city. So they send their god to take it over. But their god is a cowardly, easily led god, because they're able to just prod him with sticks towards the rational city. And so they say, we want a duel between our gods to see whose god is better. And so the scientist's like, I'm not going to fight, or the bridge engineer is like, I'm not going to fight that god. They said, no, you have to go out and fight. So he's like, okay, fine. I noticed that he's really cowardly. And there's this big argument, like, because the Traveler in Black didn't tell the town, this is your god. They're just all looking at him and saying, are you a god? Are you not a god? And there's a big debate, theological debate in the rational city. Yeah. Is this Londoner a god or not? And so he says, fine, I'll go and fight him. And so he builds a giant, towering, like Trojan horse type thing to scare the bad god away. And because the bad god is ruled by his fears. Yeah. So the bad god runs away and he wins. And they say, see, he is a god. He defeated the other god. And they're like, no, we could have built that ourselves. And then they say, yeah, we could have built that ourselves. We don't need him. We don't need a god. We were able to defeat God without him. And so then he's dismissed. And it's a really interesting story. Mm-hmm. Because you have this, there's no meaning without God. But then he says, but look what God is doing for you, and you still want a god. And then he's like, fine, here's a god. And then they realize that everything God can do for them, they can do for themselves. And so they realize they don't need God in the first place.
Yeah. It's very distant from the Tower of Babel, though. It's kind of like the opposite.
Yeah, you build up to rationalism, you get cast down from your arrogance and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Dragon Age, like the Blight and Darkspawn, I was just watching some videos on it, and I sort of had this in my head before, but the whole game's like problem is Tower of Babel. Because what happened is basically there's a city full of really powerful mages, and 4 of these mages, the most powerful, opened up a gate into heaven, and just humans being in heaven, their sin basically spreads into heaven and corrupts it. And so the Supreme Being curses them all back with the corruption he spread, and then chucks them out of heaven. And those 4 were the 4 original Darkspawn, and then spread to everyone else.
Yeah, just saying it out loud, it does seem like the Traveler in Black sort of does have an anti-theist message, but I didn't see it like that when I read it. The one thing... Let's say that universe...
It's not even anti-theist. It's just showing what rationalists will do with a god. And what they're not irrational. Because believing in a god can be very rational. Rationalism is weird, actually.
I don't think believing in God can be rational. Because rationalism is based upon... I guess you could say that this makes my life better, so rationally I should do it.
Let me ask a caveat.
I don't think an honest rationalist can believe in God.
So you have Zeus sitting on his throne.
Yeah.
And he's there, he's real. And if you do not worship him, he will strike you with lightning.
Yeah.
It is very rational to worship Zeus.
I'm not sure, because rationalism is the idea, as I understand it, that you can... Everything must be backed by something, and then you can extrapolate and interpolate.
Yeah, the lightning bolt backs.
But that would require the presupposition you don't want to be struck by lightning. And so you'd have to come up with a rationalist argument for not being struck by lightning. Which I guess is a problem with rationalism to begin with. And I guess Sam Harris's "you want to avoid pain" could work potentially.
Yeah.
Even though at some point it seems like it becomes empirical because at some point you have to say, look, I don't want to be struck by lightning.
Yeah.
But maybe that's not fair to not give them that much at least.
Yeah.
But you would have to also see proof that you would need the proof of if you don't worship Zeus, you get struck by lightning.
Yeah, Jim doesn't worship him, and Zeus hits him with a lightning bolt.
I love Dorolf in Feet of Clay, though, where he says, there is no God, and he gets struck by a lightning bolt, and he looks up at the sky and says, that's not a convincing argument.
Yeah. There's, in Baldur's Gate, there's a pair of shoes you can find from the maze, and they're called the Shoes of the Atheist. And know how items have their own little blurbs. Basically...
they give you lightning immunity?
Yeah, they give you lightning resistance. And basically there's this man who is a wizard who defied all the gods. And while running from one stage to another to save his beloved, the gods started throwing lightning at him, and so he enchanted his boots with resistance so that the lightning couldn't hurt him.
So do you think... Let's say you're a libertarian rationalist, right? Who believes in truth. Well, no, you would believe in Zeus if he was shooting lightning bolts, but that doesn't mean you would worship him necessarily. Yeah. You could say it'd be rational to worship him, but what if you believed in your values more than you believed in not getting struck by lightning with Zeus? Like, you could say, I'm not going to worship someone that needs to enforce his reign with terror. But yeah, believing in Zeus would be very rational.
Yeah.
But worshipping Zeus might not be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So let's say that the universe that the Traveler in Black entered is the state of things. Would you prefer to have a capricious, cruel god who just randomly killed the citizens of your town, or no god at all?
Wow.
And if you say, well, the god killing me at least gives me meaning, then the question could be, is having meaning enough, or does it have to be a good meaning? Like if God told you, right? God comes down to heaven, he says, comes down from heavens onto earth, and he says, there was a grand plan all along.
Yeah.
I was going to turn all of you into fish food for my fish once there was enough of you on the planet. And there's no heaven, there's no afterlife, it's just the meaning is fish food, something like that. Or maybe the afterlife is called...
That's a plot to 2 different anime.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Or maybe you could say, there is no
very close enough of it both times as aliens who made Earth so that they could eat us.
Or you could say, there is no heaven exactly, but you go to the fish food realm where it's like Valhalla, except you're just constantly eaten by fish. You could say that... Can you, actually, is the question is, can you construct a meaning that is worse than no meaning at all? Or another question, would you rather live in a universe with no heaven or hell, or with only hell?
Ooh. Well, that's a difficult one. Oh dear.
And if you only want...
That's the Peer Gynt question.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I think I'm on the... I naturally, at least, lean towards the only hell. But I do...
Yeah, see, the problem for me with hell is a lot of people try game theory hell. Like, well, eventually you get used to the torture or whatever, but it's hell.
Yeah.
They're going to remove that from you.
Yeah, they'll be creative.
Yeah.
They know their job. They've been doing it for millions of years. They'll figure something out.
Yeah.
They'll just play Baby Shark. It gets worse over time.
Yeah.
It's like a fine wine.
Hell is a place where everything's mildly irritating, but you cannot build up tolerance.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just everything. Well, that's interesting, actually, because that's kind of what hell would be, right? It's the hell of your own making, because irritants are on you, not on the thing, to an extent, I think. Outside of certain sounds hijack your senses and whatnot.
Yeah.
I learned recently, there's something called sound-induced fatigue, and how I learned that was I was editing some sound files.
Yeah.
And my volume was set to 100 on my computer because the sound files were super quiet.
Yeah.
And then I had like a USB notification go off where it's like, bink, bada, bink.
Yeah.
And it hurt quite a bit because I was wearing headphones.
Yeah.
It deafened me a little. Like it wasn't enough that I actually lost any hearing, but because it was very short, right? But it was super loud. And then I instantly felt super sleepy and tired. And so I looked it up, and yeah, it's a thing.
No, on that sound editing thing, in Premiere Pro, there's a setting so you can edit waveforms to get various different things. That's how so you can either go into your settings and you can say like, I want to increase the gain, I just want to make it louder. But if you want that Space Marine voice or the slightly crackly, then you go and edit the waveform to change its peaks, and you actually want it to hit the threshold so it peaks a little bit and makes that weird crackling noise. But there's a setting sometimes you can accidentally click called Max Pain. And so what it basically does is it roofs every single sound setting that is above 50% and floors every single sound setting that is below 50% in their waveform.
So it's basically as loud as the speaker can handle.
Yes. And so when you're editing and you have your volume slightly up because you're having troubles hearing things, and then you actually listen to a sample on Max Pain, I feel like they're just playing a joke because the setting is actually called Max Pain and it just hurts to hear.
Maybe it's a warning.
Yeah.
Or it's a way to test a speaker or something if you're worried that it's not working.
In the Traveler in Black, there is something really interesting that both civilizations miss, and I think I don't know the rest of the story, but they're both looking for a god, and they have this figure coming along that grants wishes.
Yeah. Yeah, he's...
why not worship that thing? He's your god. There.
I think... So... People don't tend to know who he is one thing. In the world. And also, the thing about him is he's
a bit of an eldritch being.
Sort of. He has... So his big tagline is, I have infinite names but one nature. So he only has a single nature, which means he is not a god. Yeah. Because he only has a single nature. He cannot lie because he's not duplicitous. He only has a single nature.
Yeah.
So he's kind of unworshipable. The reason he can grant wishes is that he's not bound by the same rules as men, but that means he's bound by different rules than men.
Yeah.
So he can't be worshipped. He can't be remembered. He can't be asked who sent him on his mission. He's sort of he is like an eldritch being, I guess, in that sense. He defies the laws of reality and substitutes his own.
Yeah.
And his singular nature is to turn chaos into order.
Yeah.
But I guess you could also say that he is all-powerful. He can create gods.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean he can provide meaning like a god can, perhaps?
Yeah.
That's kind of a strange idea as well. Because there's a lot of elementals in the world, and all the elementals shown are stronger than the gods. Which is another kind of weird thing. And also the wizards of the rational town. They have spells for binding gods.
Huh.
So the wizards are stronger than the gods in a lot of ways. And
we have no god. We can bind them.
The only reason they couldn't is actually...
Were they trying to bind the Londoner and it can't work?
No, they were trying to bind the invading god.
Yeah.
But he had a different sorcerer defending him. So he was countering their spells and turning them back on the casters. So the first one, he's like, get me a white hen, a black goat, and a mirror, and a incense brazier, and I'll show you how to bind a god. And then he casts a spell, and this great cloud of smoke goes around him. And when it's gone, the goat and the hen and him are all gone. It's kind of a funny scene.
It's interesting on the meaning front, because I just finished the book about cults, in and out, or whatever it's called. It wasn't what I was expecting at all, so I consider it the best book on cults. Definitely not what I was expecting. It's basically like a very practical guide with some information. It's not
on how to escape or start one.
How to escape. It's basically why people get into them, how to get out. And what I was wanting was more of a...
You need Charles Manson if you want to start your own.
No, it's not. I didn't want a book about starting. I wanted a book more about the rationale and theory more behind cults and like...
Why someone would start one.
Yeah, and like what's going on in them and why people get into them, like more in depth, where this is just like, alright, so here's basically why people get into them. Sociologist, psychologist, statistician, like all these people talk about here's how you get people out of them, and it's basically like a very just how you get people out, and like here's a bunch of information about various different cults, like the horrible Flavor Aid one, and Jonestown, Heaven's Gate, Manson, Moons, Scientology, like all those different groups. He goes through all of them. Various different attacks and things like the cyano gas, and so he talks about all those cults, and then he talks about like the rationality of why someone's in a cult. Like it's very what was the word? Clinical, yes. It's a very clinical thing. But one of the big things he pointed out with it, which like this is my own interpretation, is he said stupid people or smart people, it doesn't matter. Like, anyone can fall for a cult. It's like, never say, how could you be so stupid? Or when someone comes out of a cult, it's like, how could I be so stupid? Like, you're a smart guy, how'd you get a cult? Intelligence has nothing to do with it. It's someone looking for meaning.
Yes, so I wonder if... So you have the elementals, you have the Traveler in Black, and you have the wizards.
Yeah.
And you can say, okay, so power doesn't define a god.
Yeah.
The ability to bestow meaning defines a god. Because even the idol of the evil town, it's a 200 tall statue.
Yeah.
That's a very powerful creature, but the most important thing about it is that it gives you a sense of meaning. Like there's a plan, there's a purpose, there's...
Yeah. It's very much saying in the cult books, like anyone can fall for a cult. I'm thinking it's more there's It's weird, actually, because there's a lot of different kinds of cults. And I think there's something, like, there's intelligence, there's rationalism. I actually think that there's
rationalism.
A resistance to cults, which is different than all those things.
Which is religion?
No. If you're vulnerable to cults, you're also vulnerable to religion.
Right, but if you had a religion to begin with, it might protect you from the cult.
It would totally protect you.
Yeah.
But like, so he was talking about the cult. So, Mankind Project is classified as a cult.
What's the Mankind Project?
It's a men's help group that our dad was part of. He still might do, but there are different groups. So there's the broad.
What about like Alcoholics Anonymous?
That's a cult. Actually, one of the worst cults.
Well, they're like a Christian sect almost.
Yeah, well, so there was a splinter group from Alcoholics Anonymous that became a cult. So cults and religions are actually slightly different. The difference is interesting in them. And so there's cults and then there's harmful cults. Or the Chinese actually have an interesting translation. Theirs are called evil cults. But so...
Can I just take a sort of stab at it?
Yeah.
Would a religion be something that allows you to sort of look outward for community, whereas a cult would be more inward with the other members of your cult? Like a Christian might bind themselves to a non-Christian through Christianity, whereas a Scientologist wouldn't?
Not exactly. Like, that's an interesting thought, but a cult actually has nothing to do with size as well. Some people think like a big enough cult's a religion. What creates a cult, definitionally, and there's some people argue that you can have a cult without this definition. I'd say I actually disagree with that at this point. Like when I went into the book listening to it, it's like I was on that side. A cult has a singular leader who is right in everything.
Who isn't a god?
Who isn't a god.
Yes.
Because the cult, like especially religious cults, you're looking at the moon. You're looking at the finger, not the moon.
Right.
That's literally what cults are.
Because Catholicism, even though the Pope exists, he's subservient to God.
Yes. Yeah. And people can have visions and disagree with the Pope.
Cardinals might be able to fire him? I'm not sure.
They can defy him. The Pope appoints bishops, but the bishops can say no.
Yeah.
So cults have a singular leader. So
would Mormonism have been a cult when John Smith or whatever his name was founded it?
Yeah, well, so a lot of people think Mormonism is a cult still. As a whole, the bigger group of Mormons are no longer a cult. And even when he founded it, he was very much into Jesus.
Right.
As the supreme. And some people say, well, so Scientologists have Zion, who's the supreme being, and there's a lot of gods in Scientology. However, the focus is around, well, before it was around the science fiction writer who wrote over 100 novels, I didn't realize.
Yeah.
And then it's now his student who took over, who's even worse than him. I was actually wondering if Scientology was basically a joke that got out of hand.
Yeah, well, he's a very famous science fiction author.
Yeah, well, he even his son said he
used to joke if I wanted money, I'd start a religion.
I'd start a cult.
Yeah, I'd start
yeah, so I was wondering if it's like basically a joke that got out of hand. It was like, why don't I get money? But, so there's cults, and there's splinter groups, and sometimes the leader dies and a new one takes over. And so harmful cults they have a singular person in charge that runs them, and they're quite bad for you. And basically it's like you devote all your time to them, like everything goes into it. You subvert your life to it, basically, and that's a destructive cult. So you can actually have non-destructive cults. But so there's marathon groups is another thing, which fall in, like they're part of cults. But so a marathon group is basically what you could, like Alcoholics Anonymous, you could throw more into that. Some men health groups could fall into that. What is it called? The Tupperware ladies, or the makeup selling, or the like
Mary Kay and Tupperware and multi-level marketing.
Yeah, they fall into marathon groups. So they're basically they're not a cult because they don't have a singular leader. However, they self-perpetuate their ideas that feed into themselves as a feedback loop. And people do get authoritative positions within them. And so they start as a larger group, and then the smaller cells, cult leaders basically appear in the smaller cells.
Couldn't you say the same of religions, though, that they're self-perpetuating? Like they're self-enforcing and self-perpetuating? Or do all religions have a noticeable amount enough of argumentativeness allowed in them or something?
Yes, you are allowed to argue in religion.
Like even
that is another important thing that I missed, is you are allowed,
like even extreme Islam,
you are allowed to question.
You can have questions.
Yeah. When you can no longer question, then it is a cult.
Right.
That's another thing, or one of those groups, because you have to adhere to the group certificates. You cannot question them.
So when you do something heretical against Islam, like you burn a Quran or something like that, couldn't that be interpreted as questioning the law that you're not allowed to burn Qurans, and therefore the fatwas are cult-like behavior because you're saying if you deviate from our religion, we will kill you?
Well, I guess the fatwas would debate it and then kill you if you brought it to them and you're important enough to bring a debate.
And I guess the other thing is that they're also killing infidels.
Yeah,
it's not like they're enforcing their own. They're more like a conquering force than a like Scientologists don't put hits out on people for not following Scientology.
Yeah, no, there's.
So then, Jehovah's Witness, would that be a religion under that definition?
The line's definitely blurred, and so there's disagreements in the definitions. But one of the main things a lot of people argue is cults have to have a singular leader.
Because I think when I look at
there's three things that cults require. I can only remember the singular leader right now.
When I look at a cult, I tend to see the thing they have in common is completely consuming your life.
Yes.
So Jehovah's Witness, they can't really choose who they marry. They can't choose if they leave the religion. They can't choose what medical care they get or when they stand for.
Well, I think Jehovah's Witnesses might be categorized as a cult.
Because I don't think they have a singular leader, and as far as I'm aware, and I do know they've had schisms before.
Yeah. So one of the biggest schisms that actually was generated,
like Beard Man,
one of the biggest generators of schisms, is the multiple wives. They changed the rule so you can no longer have multiple wives.
Was that Jehovah's Witness?
Yeah. Oh. No, Mormons. Are Mormons? Yeah, Mormons are Jehovah's Witnesses.
No, they're different.
No. Okay, sorry. Yeah. I'm thinking about Mormons, so I don't know about Jehovah's Witnesses then.
Jehovah's Witness and Mormons both go door to door. But Jehovah's Witness, they follow So Mormons follow an extra book, the Book of Mormon.
Okay.
Jehovah's Witness follow a specific version of the Bible called the Watchtower Bible.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, that was Mormon schism. Yeah, Jehovah's, I have no idea.
And so our cousin...
I think Jehovah's are far more cult-like, though, than Mormons.
Our cousin was in love from a very young age with a Jehovah's Witness, and they weren't allowed to marry because he wasn't Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah.
And then when she finally broke away from Jehovah's Witness, her whole family disowned her.
Yeah.
And then the cousin was able to marry
her.
Him.
That's very cult-like that. Like the splintering of a family, and they have different terms for it. A lot of different cults, like the complete...
But then, if you look at Malaysia... they have laws where it's illegal to stop being a Muslim. So you could sort of see that as reinforcing the faith in that. They're a multi-religion society, but if you convert to Islam, you can never convert away.
Yeah.
And I think it might even be death penalty if you do or something like that. So...
Yeah, no, cults and religions definitely mix. And there's non-religious cults, but they definitely have... behaviors that can be very similar to each other.
And who is that kid?
But one of the main, basically what gets someone into a religion or what gets someone into a cult or multi-marketing groups, this is what gets people into multi-marketing groups actually, and the marathon groups, all these things is looking for meaning. That's the main reason why you go into them is you're looking for meaning.
So could you say that Christianity was a cult to begin with because everyone was listening to Jesus? And it wouldn't be until St. Paul came along that it became a religion.
Yeah, he had a cult-like following, definitely. It was definitely cult-like. It wasn't a destructive cult, though, because people constantly questioned him, and he always had answers.
Well, Alcoholics Anonymous isn't destructive either, as far as I'm aware.
It can become destructive. I can't remember which cult it was, but a guy basically made Alcoholics Anonymous destructive by leading a group. But
right.
A lot of the times it isn't, but it follows a lot of the footsteps of cults.
Well... I think they even say that. The whole point of Alcoholics Anonymous is you submit entirely to their mantra, entirely to their teachings.
So the guy who made a cult...
So it's very easy to abuse, I guess.
So the guy who made a cult, he had I can't remember what the term is called. It's got a good name. But military actually does cult-like things in recruiting.
Yeah.
But what this guy would do is, so you go, you're Alcoholics Anonymous, right? So you go to the group and you say, "Hi, I'm alcoholic," or whatever. And you sit on a stool in the center of the group, and the stool is uncomfortable. And you're surrounded, and there's light on you, and everyone's staring at you. And then everyone insults you.
Yeah.
And you tell them things so you can get insulted on them. And so everyone's like, these are your insecurities. So you lay out your insecurities. And then the whole group, it bombards you for half an hour to an hour with insults. Until you basically breaks your mind so that they can rebuild you.
Yeah.
And so that's what this Alcoholics Anonymous destructive cult Splinter did.
Yeah.
It's called The Game. That was what it was called. It was The Game.
Hmm.
And so they would play the game, and it's basically ruin people.
Yeah. Infinite Jest is largely about Alcoholics Anonymous, and they have a lot of that stuff in there of just breaking you down and then building you up and saying your life is now Alcoholics Anonymous. You come here every day, you do this. And it's funny because a lot of the things they do as well in Infinite Jest is, okay, take up smoking, that'll take your mind off alcohol. Take up marijuana, that'll take your mind off alcohol. They're very, very just single-mindedly devote yourself to the cause. Their 12-step process, right? It's rule number 2 or 1 or something is this will work. It's just this very get it into your head, get it into your head, get it into your head.
Yeah. No, it's so there's a lot of different ways to
But you could say that Alcoholics Anonymous, you're not going there for meaning. you're going there to get away from something that...
Well, that's interesting. So Alcoholics Anonymous uses a cult-like tactic to help you get out of something. So most people who are alcoholics, alcohol is their meaning.
Right.
And it's a killing meaning.
So it's something to fill a hole in them or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Like a lot of alcoholics is because it's to fill a hole and addiction.
So your meaning becomes attending the meetings and...
Yeah.
And...
Because...
helping everyone else.
Well, it's interesting. So soldiers in World War II, I believe, were given morphine and speed. And one other drug, I can't remember. But like 3 highly addictive drugs were given to American soldiers in World War II.
I think it was Vietnam it happened.
It was also in Vietnam.
Yeah.
But, and there's a really... there's morphine in World War II as speed in Vietnam.
Okay. Or heroin or something.
Yeah, heroin. But they were super worried that all these soldiers were going to come back and basically be drug addicts. And all the soldiers that came back who came back to families were not. They basically gave it up immediately because they had meaning in their family, they had meaning in their community.
Well, that was the mistake that the Skinner boxes made, where they found, oh, these rats will just spend all day taking cocaine if they can.
Yeah.
And then it turned out, no, if you put rats in a nice place, 1% of them will spend all day taking cocaine, and everyone else will just be playing around. And if they're bored, maybe they'll hop over and take cocaine for fun, but then they'll leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
and
that's a huge thing about studies to keep in mind. The methodology is everything.
Yeah.
You can prove, if you locked a person in a cage with a pole and attached electrodes to his brain, and he was very similar to a rat, maybe this is all he would do.
Yeah.
But it doesn't prove much else in some ways.
And so... It's weird. It's just, like, meaning and drugs are sort of in the same category. And food... is very much like a drug.
Yeah, well, it's very much a sense of meaning because that's survival, right?
Yeah, survival, but then people can take it too far and overeat, and you eat your feelings, and so you have a lack of meaning, so you eat.
Well, the thing that I used to do all the time, which I love to do, was it would be sometime around 4 o'clock, if I was all alone, just grab a book and grab a big bowl of cereal and sit down and read and eat, and it was just the best thing. And it was like, oh, I'm feeling kind of bored. What do I want to do? Oh, I want to sit down and eat a big bowl of cereal and read. And the thing was, I never did it to an extent, I think, that was unhealthy. It was more like an activity I could do.
Yeah.
But it was a very fulfilling activity. It was everything. Yeah. You had your somatic component, you had your intellectual component, you had your food, and I still miss doing that.
There is ages back, I read this study on there's a correlation between long showers and long bath lengths and people who lack physical contact with other people.
I could see that.
And it's because you're surrounded by something that's warm.
Yeah, I could see that. It sort of fulfills a similar...
Yeah, it is a correlation, it wasn't.
Yeah. And I could also see places where that wouldn't hold up. But yeah, I definitely noticed that baths have something to them that showers don't, for one thing.
Yeah.
And I think the weightlessness as well.
Yeah.
You're in a lot less pain in a bath than if you have any pain whatsoever, basically, because you're more relaxed and your weight's supported. So I think
Mr. Medicine Bath over here. What is his name? That writer, the communist guy.
Oh, Nietzsche?
Yeah.
He's not a communist.
Sorry, not communist, but Mr. Nietzsche over here sitting in his medicine bath.
Yeah. Yeah, well, no, I think a bath makes you feel quite a bit better, so I think there's that sense to it as well.
There's a remarkably high preponderance of medicine bath sitters who are also intellectuals.
Diogenes, Nietzsche.
There's a third guy who actually was a communist who ended up getting assassinated while in his bath.
Archimedes.
Archimedes just discovered something in the bath. He wasn't a chronic bath sitter.
Going back to finding something...
The guy who wrote that poem, I'm the captain of my ship,
Oh, yeah. The Invictus poem.
Yeah, he also spent a lot of times in baths in his youth.
Oh.
Because he had like a chronic illness that he slowly got over.
So was that the ship he was talking about? Was a little bath toy? I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
I mean, maybe you could read that into it.
No matter how straight the gate, no matter how charged my scroll, I am the master of this bubble bath fate. I am the captain. No, I am the captain of my bubble bath soul. So, with meaning, I've noticed a thing that made me very... It was a sort of very disillusioning feeling about counselors and therapists.
Yeah.
A lot of people say they get into anything, but a lot of people, they say they get into social work or they get into counseling because they had a lot of troubles and they want to help others. And they want to use their experience to help others and also prevent the other people from having those problems. And it gives them this great sense of meaning, right? Mm. And I had this existential crisis when a friend of mine told me he wanted to do counseling because of that. Because, he was talking about how he was always looking for meaning, and then he thought, you know what, this was my meaning. If I can help people overcome the stuff I struggled with.
Yeah.
And you might think that sounds nice, but to me, I had this little mini existential crisis because I thought, if you had never suffered, you would have no meaning. And it's not meaning comes from suffering. It was more a sense of, if you are successful in your job, you'll remove that meaning from others, or the only meaning in your life is preventing the thing that gives you meaning. So it's this sort of tautological, self-created meaning that if the problem didn't exist, the solution wouldn't exist, and you would have no meaning.
So there's a Studio C sketch where, so a bunch of football lads, a bunch of football players, American football players,
right,
come into a locker room after a game, and they run the game, and they're all hyped up, and the big guys there, and everyone's like, "Oh, you did such a great job! You're so amazing!" And there's a smaller guy there, and they're making fun of him a little bit, and then he basically turns to the big guy and says, "You know what your problem is you'll never fail in your life." It's like, "What do you mean?" "You've never failed once. Everything's going great for you. Your grades, your life, your family, your girlfriend. Your whole life will be without failure. And therefore you'll never learn and you'll never grow." And then the guy's like, oh man, he's right. I'll never fail. Such a massive failure in my life. I just had my failure! And then, hits the news clip, his life went on being, meaningful and did all these many things, and the little guy had a terrible life after that.
Yeah, well, that was kind of the source of my crisis, was... Surely there's more to... A lot of people say AI will be bad because it will remove all suffering. And if AI removes all suffering, then what will people have to strive for? Because if it can do all your work... people need a struggle. And I really hope people are wrong about that. Not that you... I've said before that life is suffering and struggle and that sort of thing. But I really don't think it is the... I really don't think we should find meaning in...
There is meaning despite the struggle? Is what you're hoping for?
Or not meaning in meaningless struggle, or perhaps some struggles are trivial and or how about the... No, okay. The specifics of the struggle shouldn't matter so much as the struggle itself, maybe. I hope that a struggle is you wrestling with meaning rather than you literally wrestling with getting enough food on the table. I hope that there's a deeper level to your struggle. I'm not saying that it's not admirable to get food on the table and it's not hard to get food on the table. Yeah. But what I'm saying is that you are, when you are trying to get food on the table and you're struggling, you're wrestling with God. You're not just wrestling with the food. And even if an AI is providing you unlimited free food, you can still wrestle with God.
Yeah, I think people will be able to do that.
And
you'd be surprised at how dissatisfied people can be with a good life.
So maybe the meaning from being a counselor could be wrestling with God rather than the counselorship itself. Because it just seems so pointless to me to not... I was listening to... It's called Under the Trees. It's a orchestral piece from maybe the 80s. And a guy died very young who wrote it, but he was an amazing composer. Possibly one of the greats of our time. And I was listening to it, and I thought, this is amazing and beautiful. And I think hopefully there is where you find meaning. Not in songwriting specifically, but in pushing out the boundaries of what there seems to be. What is it called? Qualia? Like there seems to be an independent qualia to the beauty of creation.
Yeah.
And so this guy's... And you can say the same of someone that just raises their kid right. There's this beauty in a job well done. And it doesn't need to be... Like, obviously he struggled to write the music. Obviously you struggled to raise your kid. But it doesn't need to be that you are simply trying to mitigate a negative. It can be that you're pushing towards a positive, a brighter thing. That music seems to be great without suffering.
Yeah. So, humanity's history is really weird. We've probably talked on this before, as many other things. But, so, hunter-gatherers had to spend most of their time hunting and gathering, having shelter, and they had like a little bit more than that. But a great majority of their time was sought in survival, looking for food. So, the invention of the sickle and mass planting of wheat that could be eaten, or grains, because it probably wasn't wheat, it was something slightly different, led to a singular entity, basically one man, being able to feed himself for a year by doing, I think the math was 4 weeks of work, which is huge. I think about that. You can feed yourself for a year if you just work hard for 4 weeks. That's you taken care of. And so then you work another 4 weeks, and that's your wife taken care of. And then maybe like another 4 weeks, and that's your 2 kids.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 months, there's about. And your year is sorted.
If all you need is food.
Yes. But because of this, people started making pottery and art and more interesting buildings than just shelters. And so like once they had this small period taken care of, they started doing other things. And then this really weird thing happened, which was this one guy got really, really good at pottery. And he's like, I'm so good at pottery that instead of both us harvesting food and then both of us doing pottery, I'm going to do pottery. You're going to harvest the food, and you're going to do an extra 4 weeks for me, and then I'll give you my pottery. And so one guy just spends his whole time harvesting food, and then another guy makes pottery, and then another guy makes the houses, because they're the areas that they focused into. But like the meaning beforehand was finding food, and then when that meaning was fulfilled, suddenly an explosion of things appeared. Like, it is insane how quickly, basically, from the agricultural revolution, like, I know it's quite a long time frame, like it's hundreds of years, from like the city of Ur and the cradle of civilization, but still the explosion of how quickly what people did deviated outwards from that. Because there was a lot of meaning found, and a lot of new things came out of it, and like these are things that people probably never even thought of doing.
But then, when you had the chance to be an artist, an artisan, or a farmer, suddenly you were presented with the horrible thing of choice, the horrible, cruel fate of choice, and you then had to decide: do I like making pots, or do I like farming, or do I like painting, or do I like... And then meaning becomes harder to find because you have to find your calling.
Yeah.
So that story of how humans arose, I'm going to call it into question. I think that the lesson is still the same, but the story is interesting too, because we have hunter-gatherers on Earth right now.
Yeah.
So it's possible that 11,000 years ago, it was the same. There was cities and there was hunter-gatherers.
Yeah.
And it's possible 200,000 years ago it was the same. And what we might have seen was recovery from the Younger Dryas. And it might be that humans have always had a division of labor that we're unaware of. Oh. And we may have never been hunter-gatherers as a species.
Yeah. There's a really cool thing that I thought of along that. So I remember having this talk a while back with our dad where he was saying, like, we're basically out of easy-to-get resources. So if we have a civilizational collapse, we'll never be able to get back to this point. And I was looking it up, and a guy said, so all the surface copper is gone. So there are hundreds of tons of copper and these extremely long wires stretching the whole planet that are extremely accessible and extremely high quality. And
there's a lot of pure metal around.
And in these giant concrete ruins, there's these bars of solid iron and steel. And I was thinking on this, like this guy basically talking about, like, so you have a civilizational collapse. And let's say like a couple hundred years pass. And so like you have the people going around and like, you go to the old ruins of the skyscrapers to get your steel. And I was like, it's really weird that gold is always found with quartz.
Yes.
Like, they're always together. Like, what prospectors do is really cool. I watched this little video on it. Is they basically, you hike around until you find mountains with cliffs that are made out of quartz. And then you start gold panning along a river. Because gold moves. It's really cool. Like, gold actually moves over time because it's heavy and malleable. And so it sinks to the earth. And so you go up and down a river gold panning. And you map out where the highest concentration of gold is. And then you start moving up towards the cliffs. And you keep gold panning and find higher and higher concentrations of gold.
But have you seen either satellite photos or just do you remember ever driving through the area around Dawson? Yeah. Where there's rolling dunes of quartz.
Yeah.
Where dredges have gone by and churned up the land. And I don't know if soil will ever grow there again in the next 500 years, but it's like a desert made of giant chunks of quartz. Yeah. It's very beautiful, actually.
Yeah, but it's like...
Well, not giant chunks of quartz, like quartz the size of maybe a quarter or something.
Yeah, but it's like...
What? Just pebbles everywhere.
Did we used to have like these buildings that were like made of quartz and gold and like they were power sources or something? Because like if our Earth decays long enough, basically, like humans are wiped out and decays long enough, there's just going to be these rivulets of copper everywhere, like these long lines of copper, and there'll be these giant beds of gravel and iron. It'd be very rusted iron, but it'd still be like these giant beds of gravel and iron.
So I think the biggest human, I don't know how you'd qualify it exactly, but the biggest human-made structure that you can count as one structure, it would be the American highway. But I'm going to discount that. Would be
the Great Wall,
the Great Canal in China, which goes from Beijing to somewhere else, some other city or something.
Yeah.
And it was made, let's see, I think 800 years ago, maybe?
Yeah.
And it's ridiculously large. And I was thinking if you... and the Great Wall is another good example. Let's say humans collapse and 5,000 years go by. And you're trying to figure out the rules of the world. So, geology. So, okay, so mountains get pushed up when tectonic plates get pressed together, right?
Yeah.
Because you can see the sort of patterns.
Yeah.
You don't really see it in action ever. And so you say, okay, what natural phenomenon makes giant trenches?
Yeah.
And there's a few of them. There's the Panama Canal. There's the Yukon Trench. There's this Chinese canal. And I'm sure there's others. Then you have stuff like I assume it's been torn down, but there's a hedge around all of India that the British made. So I think that might be the biggest wall ever made.
Sorry, just the British come in and install a hedge.
They just walled off India, yeah.
You cannot come in, this is our wild hedge.
I think the British made it, but I think to keep the Indians in or something. I'm not sure. But I think it's the biggest wall ever made. Yeah. Or to keep them from the ocean or something like that. I can't remember. Because they didn't want them boiling. They wanted to control salt. Yeah. So they didn't want them going to the ocean to...
collect the salt.
To make their own salt. So they're like, okay, you're more than a coastal country. You're a peninsula, basically. So we're just going to wall off the ocean.
Yeah.
Just kind of ridiculous, but yeah. Or... there is giant natural, in quotation marks, walls in Russia that look like cobblestone fences made by giants. They have, they look like giant stacked, they're in forests, and so you can't, I think people say they're fractured cliff faces.
Yeah.
But they look like walls. Well, and so you can say, oh yeah, well, there's water expanding and whatnot, but what if giants actually built walls?
Well, quarries... there's some massive quarries, and they usually fill up with water once people are done with them.
Yeah.
And so there's these giants, they would decay over time, but there's these giant holes in rocks that should not have holes in them filled with water.
Yeah, what if the Templars had way more technology than we realized, and the massive multi-continent spanning cave system that goes from, the southern bit of Mexico or something like that to... what's the island called in Newfoundland?
Oak Island?
Oak Island. So it goes from the southern bit of Mexico to Oak Island or something like that.
Yeah. Well, one of those tunnels also goes to Europe, doesn't it?
I don't know. That seems crazy, but maybe it does. That'd be amazing if it did. But I think the ocean would be in the way. I don't know.
Might be.
But I want to look it up because that'd be neat. Stuff like that exists sometimes, and it surprises me. But maybe the Templars dug it. Maybe they had a couple guys that didn't have anything to do.
I'm just thinking, right?
So our whole thought of karst landscape is wrong. It's not natural at all. It's dug by... all karst landscape is actually just dug by Templars.
I was just thinking, right? So you have Newfoundland, and you have some of the natives there, before the blood German steal, whatever. Yeah. And they're just they're just sitting out by the beach. And suddenly just a Templar's helmet just pokes up out of the sand, looks around, and sucks back into the sand. What the heck?
Yeah. Well, I didn't see it, but there's a documentary about cave carvings in Peru, I think. In ancient caves of stuff from the 1300s.
Yeah.
Templar carvings all over the caves. Before Columbus ever arrived. And and I think the caves are real. So the question is that a coincidence? Because, more than one person can use a cross or a swastika or whatever they were using. Or were the Templars just going everywhere?
I think people just like going to South America and setting up massive underground bunkers.
Maybe they made a tunnel under the ocean.
Yeah.
If you think about human history, actually, there's a lot of time, right? There's a tunnel from the UK to France. That's not a very long distance, but there is a tunnel. And you think that took, let's say, 5-10 years, maybe 50 years. I don't actually know the time, but let's say it took 50 years at most. And let's say you take the most conservative measure of human civilization and say we've been around for 40,000 years as a civilization. If a family started 40,000 years ago digging a tunnel under the Pacific Ocean...
There's a story, a funny story. So a man lived in the mountains, and he had an ore mine there. And this is a recent story. And he wanted to get the ore to a town for trading. But it took forever to... the terrain just wasn't good, a whole bunch of things were wrong. And so he started digging a hole through the mountain. And he spent something like 80... Not 80 years. I think it was 60 years or something digging this hole. So 30 or 40 years into digging the hole, a highway was built. Which could get his ore and the whole reason to that town. So infrastructure is built. He finished the tunnel anyways. And so this one man using a pickaxe and a wheelbarrow cut a hole through a mountain.
I don't know if you've seen this picture. but there was a guy who lived on one side of the mountain.
His wife died.
And his wife was sick, and it was like a 50-kilometer hike to the doctor, because it was on the town on the other side of the mountain. And so he dedicated the rest of his life to lowering the mountain pass, basically. Yeah. So he turned a 50-kilometer journey into a 5-kilometer journey. Yeah. By just getting rid of the mountain that was between his house and the village.
Yeah. And there's 2 communities, his own community and Navajo.
So if one person can do that.
And well, I saw this other
there's a technique in mining called mountaintop removal. I don't know if it's...
So there's this guy who... So he dropped out of 16, and he really didn't like laws and systems. This is in the United States. And decided to build a castle. And he worked in sheet metal. And so...
This is in the 20s, right?
Yeah.
Coral Castle.
No, it's not. Is it Coral Castle?
There's an American guy that built a castle on it.
Yeah, his son's now built. But he built... Like, it's an amazing castle. Like, he built this castle by himself, and it was very much by himself. Like, he wouldn't let his kids help him because it's my castle, I'm building it. And he would use a winch to attach to his truck to like bring up the stone and attach it and fix it in place, and would mix the concrete and make the sheet metal.
Maybe this is different from Coral Castle. So Coral Castle, it's this absolutely beautiful looking structure. They're all spiral, like it's like a castle where every inch carved.
Yeah, no, this is a different castle. This guy like built it stone by stone with it's like this sheet metal stone hybrid.
So there's multiple guys in the 20s that just stop and go, I'm going to make a castle.
Yeah, and so like his he wanted to live in this castle actually, and he did like partly live in it. He has a cabin nearby that he lived with his family, but it's just like, and it's kind of, he's like quite old now. He has like disease where you can't move your limbs properly. And he says, I pray to God every day that I'll be able to be young again, just so I can keep building my castle. But like this guy just built a castle by himself, and it's a tourist attraction. And it's completely free to be there. Howard says, there's a sign. This is private property. You are allowed to trespass. However, we have no liability to you getting yourself injured in any way. And so like the structure doesn't have any safety or security. There's a different castle in France, which is being built by I think it's my favorite kind of historian in archaeology. It's being built by investigative historians in archaeology.
No, they're just seeing how it could have been.
Yeah, so they're only using techniques that the technology at the time will have had. And so they have to have modern safety. So they wear hard hats and they have to like have safety. But I think they spent about 20 years building this castle, and like 4 more years it'll be done. Plus this crew of about 20 people are just building a castle, and they have like a quarry, and they walk on winches that pull up the stones, and then they set them in place, and they're just using all techniques.
Yeah, and Stonehenge at one point might have been a couple druids that were like, "Hey, let's build a."
Well, is that guy from America who built his henge?
Yeah, he's an American guy. Yeah,
and he did it by himself.
But the ancients, they could have been similar. Yeah. We have all these. Wow, this structure's amazing. It must have been of religious significance. Like the Nazca lines. Maybe there was a guy that was like, yeah, okay, I'll just do the math. If I walk 500 steps that way, and then I walk...
The bizarrest one for me, though, is a line.
In the UK? Weren't those, like, literally markers so you wouldn't get lost?
Yeah, but they're straight lines. Like, the trees were removed in straight lines, and they're just giant stones. Like, the crossing points of all the ley lines are these giant stones that are just lifted up just to stand there. Like, there's these huge standing stones. It should be pain to get up.
So... It's very weird because Britain doesn't have any forest, right? And so it's fairly easy to walk around the country, except it's all owned. So that's the hard part. But
there's a lot of little stone walls.
At one point, I don't know how to compare it, but it was incredibly heavily forested to the point where it was almost impossible to navigate the country.
Yeah, it's covered in oak forests, which are dark.
So it had these ley lines everywhere that people could use to find their way around, right?
Yeah.
But I wonder if at one point before that, there wasn't any oaks again. And that's when they built them. All they had to do was survey. Like, oh, put one on that hill and that hill and that hill. Come on, Bill, get the mammoths over. Get the UFO over. We'll get it to plot down some lines. Well, while the...
You say mammoth. So there was actually ancient elephants that were 4 times the size of elephants we have now. And people ate them to extinction.
Wow.
But it's we used to have elephants, basically. Like we had...
You know, a lot of those humans killed the animals things. So they say humans came to America about 11 to 12,000 years ago. Yeah. And then all the animals died, right? So in Alaska and northern Yukon, there's all these mammoths that from around the time they went extinct, there's all these frozen mammoths. And they're all the same, like they all died at the same time. And they're like, their bones are broken and they're like running. And it seems a lot more like they were hit by a wave of ice or like a comet or a meteor.
I recently, at the Bringy Center, it got changed.
or a lot of people with clubs went around breaking mammoth kneecaps for some reason.
It's actually unfortunate. The Bridging Center doesn't have the big skeletons in it anymore.
Oh.
They got rid of them. They just have like their skulls and a few of the bones left.
Huh.
Yeah, but they had a video playing in their theater, which it said the difference between mammoths and mastodons, which I never knew. So, mammoths eat grass. They got big flat teeth. And so the mammoths could survive the cooling climate because the foliage stayed on the trees and they could eat the grasslands.
Mastodons masticate?
They eat trees.
Oh.
They have teeth designed to grind up trees, so they eat their branches and leaves and bark. And so mastodons are basically these giant woolly creatures that ate trees. And so when it got when the grasslands basically started forming up here, they had to head down south because there's no... It's weird about species going... I was having this thought because one of my friends said the Earth is dying. And I basically...
Probably more life now than any time in history that we're aware of.
Yeah, well, I said the charismatic megafauna is having some trouble. And it's like, and the only things that really matter, like Earth dying, is us. And there's more of us than ever. And
you know what's funny?
Like maybe like even if a huge, I basically said I was saying like on the bad end, maybe 95% of the megafauna, like not even charismatic, but 95% of the megafauna will die. And then a different one of my friends said, "Oh, I consider 95% as in dying and dead are very similar." I was thinking about, the Cambrian explosion. All those things are extinct, but life on Earth didn't die. Like basically, when a niche empties, it fills.
Yeah, well, the other thing is, I was up late.
I was up later.
Probably. I wasn't actually up that late, I just later. Right, it's a very anthropocentric viewpoint to say that Earth is dying, because...
Oh, it's very hard to kill.
Well, so basically, if you really care about nature and life in abstract, right? And you think humans are a blight on the earth. They're kind of contradictory things, because the only life that's at risk is human life and the things that humans like. So really, when you say Earth is suffering, look at a fish farm, right? They have horrible problems with parasites on the fish. That's more life in one place than was ever out.
Yeah.
Look at a farm floods in China or Canada or the United States, less so the Netherlands, but there too. And algae bloom comes along and kills off all the fish, like 1,000-kilometer radius. Yeah. That's more life than was like the Cambrian explosion is known for being this time we think that life was huge peak.
You put your foot in the ocean, you take it down. It's like digging in the beaches of Vancouver. It's gross.
Yeah, but high life density in oceans are deserts. So I can't say with 100% confidence, but I bet there is way more life on Earth right now than... Look at the most populous mammal species on Earth is the mouse. And the reason that the mouse is so populous is because they live in houses. And they've got houses everywhere. Houseflies, spiders. They have these beautiful places they can... Now, all these things that are multiplying, right? Mice, spiders, cockroaches, parasites. Humans hate them.
Yeah.
We think they're disgusting. And they are things we are happy to kill. And so we think a world with more... We essentially think their life is forfeit. So more of them just means more things to kill. But if you cared about Earth and life, you could say that, well, you got more life. It's just... So really what you're saying is, as a human, I don't like this non-human life. Now, what you could say is there perhaps is a universal morality, and that cockroaches and parasites and mice are not disgusting because they're negative to humans, but maybe God himself, and they are the work of Satan, and it's our job to destroy them or something like that.
Well... I see mice as interesting because like I've had mouse problems basically every single fall, 3 years. And at the start, I was kind of like depressed dealing with them because to deal with mice, I have to kill them. But I was like, all right, so these mice are basically entering a trade, which is they can get a lot of high quality food, very high quality shelter, and the only caveat is they're living in the house of a giant who's trying to kill them.
But in a field, there's foxes.
Yeah, but they're entering They're just choosing a different predator.
The difference is the skill set needed, I guess. Detecting traps versus escaping foxes and birds.
Yeah, detecting traps versus foxes using their magnet to track them.
So I want to be careful here. I have seen, especially geologists, dismiss all concerns about climate change by saying the amount of living carbon on Earth is higher than ever, and things like that, right? And global warming is allowing trees to grow more than that sort. And my point is that I don't care. That doesn't dismiss it at all. My point is that I want the megafauna to live. I don't want the mice and cockroaches and parasites to flourish. So I am very human-centric in this. So I am not dismissing climate change concerns whatsoever. I am saying that you need better arguments to reinforce climate change.
No, that I was.
And also, you can't dismiss climate change by saying, "Oh, there's all these things around here, so therefore we can do whatever. I can throw this wrapper into koi pond." Yeah, no, I know you're not doing it all.
Yeah, no. One of the main things I said actually at the start.
But these doomers are useless, right? Because what they're saying is we need to get rid of humans.
Yeah, well, that's why I said when you say the Earth is dying, I basically said, you mean this.
Yeah.
Or you're anti-human, and I do not like that, and I'm pretty certain you're saying you're not anti-human.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to confirm that with my friends, and...
Yeah, like, if their thought is humans are a parasite, and that's something a lot of people do, and well, what do you do with that? Well, kill yourself. Well, what's left?
What you say to those people is you first.
Yeah. Or you say, you are my enemy.
Yeah.
And I will defend myself from you.
Well, that even saying you first is a part of it.
Be a good enemy to have, to depress people that want to kill themselves. Oh no!
Well, you might end up...
It'd be like that Suicide Squad from Life of Brian.
Ugh.
The Israeli Suicide Squad.
Or it'd be the Columbine kids.
I think school shooters are contradictions.
Well,
they want to punish the world for meaning.
They were anti-human, the Columbine.
But if you think your killing's doing anything, then obviously it has meaning. So you're kind of a contradiction in terms there, right? Like, so Jordan Peterson's theory is different. It's not that life is meaningless. You're trying to punish God for the crime of...
Yeah.
Which I think is... Yeah, that's probably much... It's not that life is meaningless. It's that you really, really don't like it.
Yeah.
So I think that's different from having suicidal enemies.
I guess so, yeah.
You're having enemies who have been abandoned by life. Because it is...
It's like the two different... You can get Joker, nothing matters, and he's an enemy meaning.
The Columbine kids, they're sort of the famous first ones, but they're very different from a lot of the shooters that followed.
Yeah.
They were much more in command of their facilities there for a time than the sort of desperate despair you...
Hey, notice.
Yeah.
That's a lot of shooters are hey, notice.
But the Columbine was almost...
Well, like he said, I see myself becoming a monster. I am the judge, jury, and executioner of humanity.
Yeah, it was almost more of a megalomania.
Well, even like the Columbine, didn't he like set up in a tower?
I don't know the details about it that much.
Yeah, it is one shooter. I think it's Columbine guys. Like instead of just going to a school and randomly shooting and going down the hallways, they actually thought through to a rational point of like, we'll set up in this tower which we can barricade and fire down from on high.
The Las Vegas shooter, he was up in it.
Yeah, there's actually a cult. There's a town that's terrorized by a sniper. There's these two guys. There's a defranchised veteran and base boy who enslaved, and they would basically go into towers with sniper rifles to shoot people.
Have you seen... So our grandfather, he was in the Korean War, and he would always tell his kids... Don't go to concerts. Don't go to big events. Don't go to like marathons. Don't go to anything where there's going to be more than 1,000. Yeah. And because he knew that there's these wackos out there like the Boston Massacre and school shootings and all these things, they happen, right? And so he was very against going near places where you have crowds of people. Yeah. Don't go to like a parade. Don't go that sort of. And I don't know if you've seen this. But a lot of sports events, like where you have this big theater, there is a booth at these places with snipers stationed in them that are watching the crowd with their...
For those people.
And that's not reassuring.
Yeah.
Like there's a guy, I assume they're using a scouting scope to look at the crowd and not pointing with their rifle itself. But the fact that they... Like, what if that's the guy that goes crazy? I hope you have a second sniper pointed at him. And then you need a third sniper pointed at him.
It's that whole sketch of the guys in the church. There's the person with the gun behind them, the person with the gun behind them, and then there's a sniper on the roof pointing at... No, there's a person on the balcony pointing at them. And then someone took it further and had like a sniper pointing at them. Then there's a battleship locked onto those coordinates. And then there's like a submarine under there. And then there's just someone in a room with a tactical nuke ready.
Yeah, like, that's a crazy job. I suppose what you could do is give them, like, 2 bullets, so they can't really go crazy, but they can still stop some.
Well, I'm pretty certain you're probably going to have that person under constant psychological assessment.
Or maybe give them, like, 6 bullets, in case they miss a few. But just sort of don't give them enough ammo to really do major damage.
Well, even if they're probably even reload rate, like a sniper rifle, like you fire it, like click, click, capture.
See, I don't want to go to a concert. A lot of stuff happens. There was that one that happened at Ariana Grande's. I don't remember what happened. People died, and I think she's touring, which is kind of impressive. Like, I'd be so scared.
You see, you say, like, don't go to those areas of, like, the concentrations, but then there was that guy in Afghanistan, possibly the most prolific serial killer in history, people who were walking down the road, pilgrimage, strangled them with his...
Wasn't that India?
Oh, it was Indian, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the guy, like, he just...
That priest of Kali.
Yeah, he just strangled people.
Yeah.
And, like, I was thinking, like, what...
Well, don't go walking alone either.
Yeah. Well, so the,
Always stay in a well-armed group of 3 that you trust.
The Zodiac Killer, how he was so effective is he was a traveling serial killer who went through rural areas. And
But the other thing about crowd, so a thug, literal thuggy, jumping you on the side of the road and killing you, that's a 1 in 6 billion chance of you being his target.
Yeah.
You go to a concert, and you've got 10,000 people there.
Yeah.
Any one of them might be a guy that snaps. Whereas the thug is the guy that is just one guy that snapped. It could be anywhere on Earth.
Terrifying alone. Can I tell you about, like, the most terrifying...
Sure.
Alright, so we were going on a family trip, and we went out to this cabin it's farther north in the city. I don't know how, but it's like a big city. And you or mom or stepdad, you guys were all in the vehicle and you'd left, and I was just staying in the building and had a garage. And I was just staying there, and we had this little dog with us, and it started barking, and I looked up, and a pole bear had punched a hole through the door and just, like, walked into the building. And so I ran around into the garage, and the garage had 2 different entrances. So I ran into the garage, and the pole bear walked around, and it's like blocking me from the door, and went towards the other entrance of the garage. So I ran around the other way, and the pole bear just walked around and, like, cut me off again. And then I ran around and got the pole bear to enter into the garage. Then I closed the one door, ran around, closed the other door, then ran out of the house, and you guys were driving back. Pole bear busts out of the garage, and you guys basically turn the car around, open the door, start driving, and tell me to run and get in. And then I woke up. And it was like one of the most terrifying dreams I've ever had. And it's weird because I've had, like, serial killers in my dreams, like horrible monsters and these really weird things, but it was just so terrifying.
I think it was my best friend's dad who was in igloo, and a polar bear entered the igloo and, like, took up the entire entrance while he was sleeping, and then he was awake with a polar bear right there. And the Inuits he was with were outside the igloo looking at it shoving its body into the igloo. And so they snuck up behind the polar bear and slid the rifle alongside its body and pointed at the base of its skull and then shot it. And yeah.
No, Survivor Man had this whole video where he was dropped off in the Arctic. And his usual thing is, like, he has a limited amount of stuff they leave him with, and he has to make it back and signal for help. And he films this. However, when he was dropped off in the Arctic, they gave him a high-powered rifle in case he encountered a polar bear. So he wasn't supposed to use it for hunting or getting any food, but if he came across a polar bear, he's supposed to use it. So the whole time he's out there, basically this old Inuit hunter, trapper, had his dog team, and he's basically walking along, he's like looking through his scope, just trying to find something. And he sees, I think the guy's name's Urs or something, or like the Survivor Man. He sees him through the sniper rifle. Like, what the heck is this guy doing out here, slowly making his way? Oh yeah, I remember them dropping him off out here. He's like filming something. And so he just started, like, stalking him across the landscape, and the hunter actually, like, scared off a polar bear for him that he wasn't aware about. And then he's going along, and so I was just like, oh, I'm getting so hungry. This is brutal. The walking, like, if I didn't have to film myself, this would be a lot easier, but having to film myself, carrying all the camera gear, like, this is just killing me. And he's like, I don't know what to do. Then the dog sled guy pulls up, like, how are you doing out here? It's like, oh, I'm doing the Survivor Man thing. It's like, I'm supposed to be out here for, like, another 4 days before I, like, signal for help. It's like, I'll just take you back to town now. It's like, yeah, sure, let's go. And then he's like, yeah, no, I was watching you the whole time. I was making sure you stayed safe.
Yeah, I don't think... Like, when he goes into the middle of the woods and there's bears around, right? That's one thing. Or if you go into the Amazon and there's jaguars. But going to places where there's human predators, like things that specifically seek and hunt out humans, like polar bears or tigers or leopard seals, that seems like a bad idea.
You know, there's this video of a guy in Siberia. It was a small polar bear, but still a polar bear. It got its tongue stuck in a can and it was, like, frozen in place. And there's this very interesting thing, which is animals will go to humans for help. Because they know that humans can help them. And so this Russian guy's just, like, chilling in his cabin. And this polar bear walks up towards him. And, like, got this tongue. And it's like, oh, okay, I think I'll help you. I'm not exactly certain how. He's filming it. And it tried to come into his house, like, no, you're not coming into my house. And he, like, pushed it away with his hand and closed the door. And he called for some rangers and they tranquilized it, then, like, poured boiling water to free his tongue. But I just love the point of the video where it's like, yeah, I'm going to help you. It's like, all right. And he tries to climb into his house, like, no, you're not coming into my house. Or this other video of this they had like this raised cabin. The design of this Siberian house, like they actually designed in this country, is ridiculous. So they're built on really thick stilts, and then they have these really flimsy staircases. And so the design is a human can travel up these staircases, but a polar bear will break them by walking on. And the houses are tall enough so the polar bear can't get into them. And so there's this video of this guy, he looks out his window, and there's a polar bear down there. And it looks up at him, and then it stands up, and he backs away from the window because it can look into his window just by standing. It's just like, Christ.
Yeah, I think they're about 9 feet. So if it would have to have been on snow, then I guess.
They can be tall.
But they're not going to be much taller than that. But a floor is only 12 to 15 feet. So
yeah.
Well, I guess it's more like 9 feet layers and stuff. So yeah, I could see it peering, if there was like a foot of snowpack. Yeah. And then if it raises its paws up, it can reach.
Yeah, anyways, after that dream, I was thinking, so why do we want to save the polar bear?
Because you want to have the dragons at the end of the world.
Like, there's a theme, I want my children to look at these things. Or whatever.
Yeah.
But that thing's looking at you like, I'm going... it's a footage of, so there's this little boy, I think, he's standing there, and it's a polar bear cage, and the polar bear is basically looking at him, and it steps forward, opens its mouth, and slams it against the glass, and it's like his mouth is the side of his body, and he's like a little spook, and he starts walking away, he's about to cry, and then like one of the women watch, he's like, oh, she's saying hello. And then the kid's like, oh, okay, say hello. He walks away happy. And someone in the comments said, this woman has the intelligence of a pineapple. And then someone else said, no, what she did was really smart. She didn't terrify the kid. And then someone's like, do you want to let them know the harsh truth of the world or to keep them safe?
Or maybe they shouldn't think polar bears are friendly.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people are basically like. He's saying, she's making so he didn't cry. And then a bunch of other people are like, no.
Have you seen, it was either a tiger or a gorilla, someone was mocking it, and it started wailing on the glass and breaking it.
That was probably a gorilla.
But you don't necessarily want to keep taunting these.
Well, there's this other video. It's a orangutan, so they're like standing up 3.5 feet tall, but they got those creepy long arms. Anyways, so this guy's there, and his guy's like nice jacket on. And it reaches out, and it's like it grabs the bottom of his jacket, and it turns it a little, and then it starts taking off the guy. It's like, okay, so he takes off his jacket, and then it puts onto both his arms and like starts zipping up the jacket. And I saw that clip, but I remember watching a clip later on. The guy trying to get his jacket back when it's done. It's like, okay, I have my jacket back. It's like, okay, so it takes off the jacket and starts getting back, and it's like, no, I don't think I will. And it holds on to the jacket. And this guy's like way bigger than an orangutan, and he can't take it out of its hands.
Strong. Monkey, so I looked it up one time, and I think what's going on in part with apes, which is really unfair, because humans are apes. But apparently most apes are always at maximum strength no matter how much they work out.
Yeah.
So you can't have a buff gorilla because a gorilla is always going to be basically as strong as it gets.
Yeah.
But for some reason, humans don't have that same ape advantage.
But here's something else that humans do have over basically every single ape that I know of. Is basically all apes skip leg day.
Right, and we're also taller.
Yeah, but like
sort of, like barely. I think we're taller than gorillas.
Yeah,
slightly.
But, like our legs, if we're fit, like to the extent where you can actually run, like sure they can charge fast on all fours, but they cannot keep up with it.
Right.
Like maybe their bluff charge is a little bit faster than our...
They can't keep up with a fit human. But the thing is that all apes are going to be max fitness and humans aren't. It's not fair. I guess that basically means they're doing steroids all the time.
Well, if humans have like a hunter-gatherer, is that going to be a max fitness? Well,
no, I think it's actually like they're...
Like a gorilla could work out and won't do anything?
Yeah. It's not that their life is optimal, it's that they're born at max... Because your muscles are sort of saying, oh, you need this, right?
Yeah.
Your muscles could just grow. And that's sort of what steroids do.
Yeah, so like you look at a rock climber's muscles versus a heavy weightlifter's muscles versus a long distance runner versus a swimmer. Like
and it's adaptation.
Yeah, their muscles are all different.
So I guess that could be an advantage over a gorilla. Yeah. A gorilla is not going to be able to specialize.
Yeah, so even on the thing of humans are going to wipe themselves out. All right, so we are a species, right? Which is supposed to be naked in the center of Africa.
Maybe. Yeah.
Well, like, so based on our theories, like, and people can do that. It's like a condition that...
I think the Hopi Indians are on this.
A thing that humans can survive, like, if we have none of our technology to adapt, we can be naked in Africa.
Yeah.
So, as a species, we have moved to every corner of the Earth besides the center of the Sahara.
And Antarctica.
And the North Pole.
Yeah.
Basically everywhere else.
And, large stretches of Russia and Canada.
Yeah.
China.
Basically like, we've moved everywhere. Other animals don't do that. Like, maybe a few birds, but even they migrate.
You don't see any humans in, like, Nahanni Valley. No. Or in the Gobi Desert, or...
Well, okay, Nahanni Valley is interesting. There was humans. They left.
Yeah, well...
Do you know about the exodus?
Well, I know that the Naha, it's named after the Naha people, and the Naha people are the people over there, because the Dene don't like the Naha might still actually be in the Nahanni Valley. It would be hard to tell, because nobody goes to the Nahanni Valley, really. It's very rare.
Well, our dad's going.
He's probably going to the watershed.
He's boating.
Yeah, so he's going to go to part of it, but it's a massive area.
Yeah, they're going to go nearby the headless.
Our, what do you call him? Our great uncle lived there for a summer. He was a gold panner there. But there's also the gold panners and gold miners there. They had stories about caves with hot springs in them and tropical fruit and mammoths and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, so there's no... I don't know about the Naha, but so in the Nahanni Valley, there was actually a group of First Nation that they basically moved south. And they live there now, like in the south area. But basically at one point in the history, like their elders have stories of one of their elders basically told all of them, all right, it's too dangerous here now. We're all moving. And so they all went south.
From the Naha people or from the Walia? Or
I don't know which group, but one of the group, like they're still around today.
Right, but the people that left, were they afraid of the
I don't know what they're afraid of. They just left.
The Walia or the...
They might be afraid of the Wailu.
Which are those, they're like Andrewsarchus, giant wolves. And then there's the Naha people, which are... potentially Denisovans or just humans.
Yeah, I think they were leaving because of the Wailu.
Walia, but
the werewolves.
Yeah. Well, I thought they're just like really big wolves.
They're also werewolves because a woman gave birth to them. Do you know about the I told my dad about this. He had a great reply. Do you know about the pale naked people, the Nahanni area? Okay, so it's this bizarre story of this guy, like these people were out boating. This is in the lower land, NWT. That's where Nahanni is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is in lower NWT. These guys were out boating on a river trip. And they saw incredibly pale people that were like had no clothing, basically scuttle away into the forest from the waterfront.
German tourists?
That's what Dad said as well. It's German tourists. But actually, they found a girl there who had gone missing, who was also naked, and she seemed really dazed. But yeah, you both have the same thoughts, German.
Yeah, pale people that just go anywhere on Earth and walk around naked all the time. But who else is there? They're the only people on Earth you're going to find anywhere naked. Desert, ice flow, Germans. So, can I end with another thing on synchronicity?
Yeah, go
Work
ahead.
For you?
Yeah, I think I'm...
So, the Traveler in Black book... Actually, yeah, I want to talk about that a bit more. Just the fact that this very interesting, very well-written book that uses language in a way I've rarely seen. It's a lot more... You know how Shakespeare invented the word eyeball? And you used to see a lot of authors invent, like not new authors, but in ancient times, authors would have the wine dark sea or Stygian darkness or pitch black. These were phrases that were invented by someone.
Yeah.
So pitch black means as black as pitch, like as black as tar.
Yeah.
Or possibly as black as pitch stone. But you had these phrases that were made up at some point, but now people don't tend to say as yellow as a fourth grader's duotang binder or something like that. You don't see people make up their own color description and their own, like as dangerous as a flock of bees that are dosed on heroin. It tends to be deadly serious, bloody dangerous, or like its language is very standardized in a lot of writing. But this guy makes up all his own descriptors for things, and he does weird things like beetling eyebrows, which I think is actually used in places, but he sort of combines terms that you wouldn't quite associate with each other, but it works. It's like, oh, the eyebrows crawl around like beetles. It's interesting. And he also uses language that, like, I have a fairly large vocabulary, I think, or at least I know a lot of words. But I'm very glad I read The Traveler in Black on a Kindle, because it's like every page there's 4 words I don't know, and they're great words. Like he said, the shout ran around the welkin, which is an old term for the sky, or lowering clouds, where clouds are low and looming.
Yeah, I didn't know lowering.
Or he has a delphinious robe, which means a sort of, in those paintings of nymphs where it's sort of translucent and see-through. I thought that was like gauzy or sheer, but delphinious is the term, I guess, for it. So
I think I knew that too.
There are all these great words that very describe things exactly the way I want to. So I'll have to steal them. And so he's got this very interesting vocabulary. And I've never heard of this book, and I thought that's crazy that I've never heard of this book until I've thought a lot about God and meaning because it could just be a story about a real jerk genie, basically, who goes around granting people's wishes in a horrible way.
Yeah.
But there does seem to be a greater depth in there, whether he meant it to be or not, and I think he probably did mean to be there. And it's almost as if it came into being when I was ready. Like, there's a Reddit called Recon, like that. It's based on the Mandela effect, and it's people that are saying, instead of the Mandela effect being a psychological phenomenon where you think Berenstain was spelled different, think Mandela died, or you think the Fruit of the Loom logo has a cornucopia on it, instead of you being wrong and it's due to how memory is actually based on symbolism and what seems right rather than what is.
Wait, doesn't it have a cornucopia?
No, it's just like 2 apples and some grapes. So what these people have determined, instead of it being that humans, we were talking about memes before the show, instead of humans remembering things in memes, so we remember what is more true rather than what is. So, like, it's not mirror on the wall either. That's not how the rhyme goes. It's magic mirror on the wall.
Yeah. Or, and it's not you're a wizard, Harry. It's Harry, you're a wizard.
Yeah, and it's not the lion shall lie down with the lamb shall lie down with the wolf, a lion with straw. And so there's all these things that they were written or drawn some way. But our memory of or Mr. Monopoly doesn't have a monocle.
Yeah.
Our memory remembers a better version. So I think if you want to create the version that will continue throughout humanity, like you were saying how the Bible adopted Mary a Virgin, we should probably go with our memory because the Fruit of the Loom with a cornucopia looks way better than their logo sucks.
Yeah.
The really weird thing about the Fruit of the Loom logo is if you go to the trademark of their logo, where it describes their logo, it says cornucopia on it, but the picture included in the trademark has no cornucopia. So even the lawyers or something, looking at the picture as they wrote up the legal documents, wrote cornucopia included in the image.
Neo, wake up.
So what these people have...
It's a glitch in the Matrix.
What these people have decided on this website is, rather than it being a psychological phenomenon, they have transferred universe. And because there's things that they say, I would have heard about this. Like Brazil wood, for example. It's a wood that bleeds red and it looks like ruby. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
It's called dragon.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's... And they're saying, look, if this stuff existed before I learned about it, I would have known about it already. Or they say Pyrospora. I think I talked about them on the previous episode. They're giant 100-foot-long sea worms that are glowing and...
Nope.
And you know the...
I know about cutter worms, which I really wish I didn't.
Or bobbit worms?
Sorry, bobbit worms. I know about those, but...
Yeah, so... No, these are cool. They're not actually real worms. But... So you know Leviathan from Magic the Gathering? Yeah. That giant thing going for... They look almost identical to that.
Mm.
They're this giant hollow see-through tube that glows, and it can grow to be 100 feet long.
Oh.
And they exist. And not only do they exist, it's not like, oh, the giant squid, it's like, was that a thing, was it not? Or the oarfish, where people didn't catch one until recently, these massive 40-foot-long fish, right?
Yeah. No,
these are common. They're, like, people have diaries, like, there's nothing like the magnificence of the Pyrospora on when you see them glowing in the sea.
Never heard of it.
Yeah. Now, we'll have to look at pictures after. They're cool. So, they're not a worm. They're actually, I forget the name of the creature. They're basically snails, I guess, or something like that. But they're...
Is there snot trail?
No, there's like hundreds or thousands of them glued together into giant tubes.
Huh.
And then they just kind of pass food to each other down the tube. And so it's like a colony.
It's not colony.
It's like floating snot coral.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the way to look at it. Except like the snot is just a glue. Most of the thing is their bodies.
Yeah.
And they sort of... No, it's like a man-o-war.
Yes, that's better.
It's a much better way to describe it. It's a bunch of similar creatures working together to create a bigger creature.
I remember someone describing an encounter with a man-o-war. It's amazing. The fisherman, and he had his line in the water. He caught something, pulled it up, and as a man-of-war he pulled up. So he like pulled...
Are they big?
They can be very long, and they're big. So he pulled up a man-of-war, and he had, like, his head. It's like, well, I caught a jellyfish. And then its tentacles fell off and slithered away. It's like, what the heck? And then the head split into pieces and crawled off, and he's just like, that is the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
I didn't know they could just come apart like that.
It was probably a dead one that fell apart, but...
I don't really know anything about them, but...
They're really weird. Like, their tendrils can be super long.
But it is...
Well, that parallel universe thing's kind of interesting.
So, it's like, what if the world gets weirder the longer time goes on, and stuff just gets added into... It gets retconned in.
Well,
maybe it's called retcon even.
Well, I had this thought, right? This fell into my theory as a kid of the thought that you're the only person that exists. You know how Minecraft, like, loads in chunks?
Yeah.
So, I'm in the Yukon, I'm in my house. So, that area is loaded in.
Yeah.
And then someone, like, talks about the war in Afghanistan, because that was going wrong in my childhood. And it's like, is that actual place, is it real? Or is, like, just information's coming from the void and then existing here, saying there's a war of Afghanistan, but it's actually not real. It doesn't exist. isn't a place.
Didn't I talk about local reality last episode?
You might have.
How the Nobel Prize winner proved that if you can't see it, it's not there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He disproved localized.
No, he proved that reality isn't locally real.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're not looking at it, it's not there. Yeah. And we figure he did it just by looking away really quickly and making it disappear.
Oh, I thought he proved that non-local reality is real. So all reality is real.
He proved that reality isn't locally real.
Yeah.
So if you're not looking at it, it's not there.
Oh, okay.
So the chunk only loads in when you walk into the area.
Huh.
Yeah.
I misinterpreted that statement because that made me thought that reality was a constant time.
No, it's unloaded until. It's unloaded until the very.
Yeah, I completely misunderstood.
Yeah.
So my thought as a kid though is more and more reality loads in the longer you live and the more you travel and the more you're told.
Yeah, well, but in Minecraft it actually unloads behind you, right? If you walk far enough. So reality is the same. It only exists when you need to call a function. So what that means though, which I think is weird, is we don't know what it means to observe something. Because if you're calling a function, right? A black hole on the other side of the universe might be affecting our tides, so that function still needs to be called.
Yeah.
Now what it could be, and I don't know if this is in the theory or not, in Skyrim, the location, apparently, which still blows my mind, of every single NPC in the world is calculated at all times. And they're all walking and doing their life at all times. So it could be that the resolution of the information shrinks the further away it is.
So Dota, a lot of video games actually, but Dota has a replay system. And replays break when the game up.
Yeah, because it's just recording what you do.
The data points.
Yeah.
And so
it's just recording the actions.
Yeah. I actually watched a really cool thing.
You know what actually blows my mind? Age of Wonders doesn't do. Yeah. You have to send an entire map every time you take a turn in the email play. So you're sending these 50 megabyte maps when you could just be sending 3 mouse clicks, which would take up 4 bytes.
A guy did a really cool thing with the Dota replay, which is he made it so it would work after a big update happened. And so basically it tried to run through all the data points, but things are working differently. And so whenever it had a break that it couldn't handle, he then tried to correct it to make it work.
Same thing happens with Smash Bros.
Yeah,
because they just record it with
inputs.
The inputs. But yeah, I really think that's a much more efficient way to store data and should be done, and it's because it's on their servers. Whatever that Reddit is, it has all sorts of crazy things. There's giant. I saw this. And I didn't realize this was a natural phenomenon. But at night sometimes there's pillars of light in the darkness.
Yeah.
And I thought someone was playing around with a really powerful flashlight in the distance. But apparently there's just pillars of light for some reason. Yeah. So
sometimes it's cars on highways reflecting light up.
No, but there's just pillars of light as well. They're just a thing. Just light pillars.
Really?
Yeah. There's all sorts of crazy... But the funny thing is, when you see someone say, okay, this can't be real. There's rainbows that occur in winter due to ice crystals, that's crazy. Or it'll be something like sundogs, right? Or it'll be wispy, or it'll be what are they called? Mamaris clouds? Those sort of lumpy, looming clouds that we get here probably once a year or something. They're very rare clouds, but they're not as rare here. Or lenticular clouds. So the things that you know about, you're like, well, duh, everyone knows.
Well, I think one of the two really weird ones is 3. Those bushes that spontaneously combust.
You know that one?
Yeah, so there's bushes and swamps that just catch fire.
Right.
The glow-in-the-dark moss. I can't... But there's the glow-in-the-dark moss. And also peat bogs shooting up jets of fire. So you know the fire swamps?
Yeah.
We actually have that.
Oh, wow.
Peat bogs...
because they're on fire. Yeah.
But they're on fire underneath. And so jets of fire will just come out of the ground in swamps.
Yes, so there's...
The idea of the fire swamps didn't come out of the ether is based on...
Yeah, so these things theoretically exist all the time, but it also sometimes feels like they come into being when you're ready for them.
I can't think of any examples, but I've definitely come across things like that of
it happens a lot with words, where you've never heard a word before, and then you hear the word, and suddenly everyone is using the word, and you're like, wait, no, that... Or how about this one? I made up that pronouns are descriptive, not prescriptive, right? And then Destiny made that his tagline 3 months later. And now everyone says it. My idea whales that float in the...
Yeah.
I also had another thing.
Everyone's stealing your idea whales.
Yeah, but I had this thought. I wanted to ask our mom a question. So I went down the stairs, and I totally forgot what the question was. Right. So I went back upstairs, and the moment I entered the spot where I had the thought, it came back to me. So you know what I think happened? I think the idea whale became untethered and was dropped off at the top of the stairs. Yeah. And I had to go back up the stairs to retether it in my mind.
You know the thing that gets me, and part of it just, it's we're related to our mom. That's sort of what confirms. Is I feel like in the past 3 years, basically, it started with me watching Bob Gimlet. basically. It's like seeing those things. And then I maybe you were always like, but for me, like getting slightly more, I don't know if it's conspiratorial, but just like, oh, there's this weird thing here and there's that there, and like UFOs, whatever, like those things. And it's like I tell our dad about it, and kind of like a reasonable conversation. And he's like, yeah, and like we talk about, we have some ideas about it, and we theorize about it, whatever. I talked to her mom, she's like, yeah. It's like, what?
Yeah, that already existed, yeah.
Yeah, I know about that. Yeah, I've seen UFOs. Just, what? Yeah. What? Like with our dad, it's like, oh yeah, that's interesting. Let's talk about it and discuss it and go through with it. And it's like, I don't believe it, but I can see where you come from. That sort of like an amicable like person who's willing to talk about things, because our dad's kind of like that. He will talk stuff through with you, even if he disagrees with it. But our mom's just like, oh yeah.
No, I think I'm fairly naturally leaning towards rational. So yeah, no, it's not mine at all. It's just I can't really deny the fact that the arrogance assume I know everything. I realize that more and more the older I get.
See, it's for me with Big particular. I don't want to, like, I really don't want to believe in Bigfoot. Like, you know the whole thing of like, I want to believe for, right? Yeah. It's like, for me, it's like, no thank you. Like, giant stealthy apes that kidnap people, or just, not even kidnap, just, I don't care, like, it could do nothing to me. But if it leers at my window, like, I'm done.
But is it better to live in a world with a malevolent Bigfoot or no Bigfoot at all? Because a world without Bigfoot is a world without meaning. I think Bigfoot and meaning are very tied, because what that means...
Well, Bigfoot in, I can't remember which group, but he's the spirit animal of honesty.
It's also like, if Bigfoot exists and he's been dismissed and ridiculed by everyone so long, it means that the rationalists lose. It means that there's more to life than what science tells us. There's more to life than just what you've observed. Yeah. The world is a lot bigger than you thought, which means there could be anything. There could be a grand plan. There could be a god. There could be multiple. You would have thought I guess the UFO report was conclusive, but it's a similar thing where if UFOs exist, or if Bigfoot exists, it means that God exists, that there's a heaven.
This record still hasn't...
Well...
The one that was shot here.
Hasn't been found, quotation marks. But yeah, if Bigfoot or if UFOs exist, it kind of means meaning exists, God exists, because it means that you have to account for the fact that you don't know everything, and there's more to the world than you... And that's what, like, the giant worms, the giant glowing worms, it's like the world's bigger than you thought. Stop being so arrogant just because you think that... this was a different topic, but I think a lot of bad mental health is spent trying to perfect hell instead of climbing to heaven. So what I mean by that is people say, okay, you need to talk about your feelings. You need to figure out why you're anxious and work on it, right? So I was very anxious the other day, and I was just had this anxiety growing and growing, and I was thinking, why am I anxious? Is it because of this? Is it because of that? What do I do about that? What do I do with this? When the time comes, how will I respond? I was like, okay, I got to work on this. Okay, when the thing that makes me anxious happens, you got to be young. You got to take off the blinders and see the wolves around you. I got to be ready for this event. But then I thought, that's not really what Jung said. Like, he said you can't be blind to your problems, right? But what Jung said is, if you're anxious, he didn't say if you're anxious, you got to look at all the problems that are hitting you, right? He said you've got to look at what you are doing wrong. You have to look at where not the problems around you. So the problem when you're anxious, it's not... Okay, you need to stare at those wolves and think about how they're going to devour you. You have to think about, what do I do now? So the question is, am I integrated and am I individuated? Am I doing everything society needs of me, and am I doing everything I need of myself? So do you have a job? Do you have a wife? Do you have a kid? Are you setting boundaries and doing what you want, not what other people wanted? And when I thought about it that way, I was like, I'm working towards those. Oh, and suddenly all the anxiety, like, auto-sorted, and was categorized under similar headings, like untangled, and was categorized, and it's like, right, you do these things and the rest falls into place. And so but what we teach is more like, all right, you got to perfect hell. Like, okay, what are you going to do about those wolves? What are you going to do? How sharp is that one's teeth? Can you... It's like, no. Stop walking into packs of wolves.
Yeah.
You've got... So...
Stop walking through the dark forest and leaving the path.
So if you go and get a doctor checkup every day for a year, half the time you're going to be worse than your average, and half the time you're going to be better than you. So at the end of the year, the doctor's going to say, well, you were going downhill half the time, so I guess you had half a good year. If you go to the doctor at the end of the year, the same year, just once, and he says, well, you're at where you were at the start of the year, so your year was a good year because it was an average.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, do you want a year that was half bad or a year that was average smooth sailing? And it's more than that, actually, because health checkups aren't free. They take up your time, they stress you out. Tests like x-rays and MRIs and that sort of thing, they can cause cancers, they can cause problems, they can cause mind problems. They don't typically, because it's such small doses. But you're building up, like, if you do it every day for a year. Like, if you x-ray yourself for cancer every day for a year, you're probably going to find it. So it can be better to step back and look at the big picture than the little details in terms of, but so much mental health stuff. It's like, all right, you're in hell. Let's make hell a pretty face instead of, no, here's the path out. So going back to The Traveler in Black, with this almost synchronicity thing of finding this book, when our dog lost her glow collar last year and it stopped glowing quite shortly. Battery died. She lost it in maybe 1/2 acre to 2 acres of...
Yeah.
No, not half. Let's say 2. Let's say 1 to 5 acres.
Yeah.
Okay, so around 2 acres.
At these coordinates.
No. And that's not a huge... Like, an acre isn't a huge area, but in dense old growth forest with falling down trees, that's a very large... Yeah. You could spend probably, I don't know, months combing through it, looking for stuff, and you wouldn't find maybe years. Because it become... Christopher Robin lives in the 1/2 acre woods, right? And they're able to have all sorts of... The scale of things becomes much larger the more your line of sight is occluded, the more difficult it is to get around.
Yeah.
There's a reason the Breath of the Wild world feels huge, even though it's only 10 kilometers across. So she lost her collar, and that's basically as good as lost. It's 2 acres of... So I was walking around in there to see if I could find it. And so I walked around for an hour or two, and I didn't find anything. I found all sorts of stuff, but didn't find it. And I decided I'll start walking back. So I took this wide route back, and I saw a clearing off to the side, and I thought, oh, that's a cool clearing. I'll go look at that. But some part of me was like, I'll go look at it after I just take a little step off to the left. Even though this clearing looks really cool, I just wanted to take a little step to the left for some reason. So I took a little step to the left, and boom, there's the collar right in front of me. That's been lost for like 6 months. I pick it up, and I'm like, what do I do with it? Is that proof of God? Is this... Like, there's no way I should have been able to find this collar.
And then you take a step back from the left in the clearance.
Well, you keep in mind as well, right? A collar, a see-through collar, because a glow collar is just a see-through bit of plastic. A see-through collar, you could hide it under like 2 leaves.
Yeah.
And this thing's been in the woods for 6 months. It could have been buried. It could have been put under a log. It could have been anywhere. And I'm just walking along, and boom, there it is right in front of me. When I take a path that just sort of twigs me over the way I wasn't going to go. It kind of makes you think about reality and existence a lot. Is that what do you do with that? That Jung talks about synchronicity, right? How things, you will see things from you'll run into people when you think of them. And I talked about Mark Twain, how he would not send a letter to people that he felt like he should send a letter to, so he would get one. So that doesn't, I guess that, what that says to me in a way, I guess, is... Well, a billion things happen a day, so some of them to be unlikely. But also it could mean that, like Wolfgang Pauli's hidden variables. Maybe if you go looking for a collar, you find it. Maybe that's a law of the universe we don't know about. Like there's magnetism, there's gravity, there's electromagnetism, there's gravity, special relativity, and then there's, if you go looking, you will find.
There's narrative and luck.
Yeah, or if someone is near you, you will think of them, or if you think of someone, they will be near you.
I'm quite honestly convinced that narrative is one of the forces.
Well, you look at someone like Stephen Hawking, and you're like, okay, here's the smartest guy on Earth, and he can't use his body. And it makes you go, like, that is a story. That is in a cruel, horrible, ironic sense. Yeah. Right. Like the greatest mind has no body.
Or, well, even like the stories of humanity, like that historian, Hardcore History, like he can't read fiction anymore. Yeah. Because history's too silly.
So, I just learned this recently, but Bridge to Terabithia, that story about the girl who drowns. And, that's based on the author's life. It's based on a true story. It was her friend or her son's friend who died. But the thing is, they were struck by lightning.
Oh.
And so when she wanted to write this book, she wanted to sort of write about her life story, but she thought nobody would believe it if she wrote what had happened. So she made her drown in a storm.
We had a guy talk to us at our school about workplace safety. Like, if you think the condition's unsafe, don't go into.
Yeah.
So this guy, he's like permanently crippled. He has to use like a walker. He recently recovered from, at the time, so it was about 10 years ago, like using a wheelchair all the time. He's had a lot of skin grafts. So what happened to him is he was a water silo tower builder, and he went up into the dome in a storm and got hit by lightning while he was inside it. And so he bounced around inside the structure.
Oh, gee. And
also was cooked in there because like the lightning drew him while he's bouncing around. And then he fell out the bottom of it and bounced through all the bars.
Jeez.
And so, the person in the truck nearby thought he was dead because he was like a blackened, broken corpse, basically.
Yeah.
And he survived that and became an advocate for workplace safety.
And did he have a feeling beforehand of, maybe I shouldn't do this? Or was that what he was saying?
He was saying that he was looking at the storms, like, I shouldn't... because he saw, like, there's a storm. He's like, that's not safe. But he's like, but we've done this business anyway, so I'll just go do it.
I remember one time I had piano lesson. I thought, I have a feeling they're canceled, but I didn't say anything. And so I was driven, I was out here, so it was a long way. So I was driven all the way to piano lessons, and piano lessons were canceled. And we got back, and there was a message, like, oh, sorry, they're canceled. I wasn't able to inform you until now because there was an emergency. And I was like, oh, wow, I should have said something. I should have said, maybe they're canceled, maybe we should phone. And I've also had situations in my life, I can't think of specifics, where I think this is really stupid, but I'll do it, it's going to be fine. And then I get injured or something bad happens. And I've also had horrible dreams and realities. I think the one that hits me most probably is when I smashed my front teeth, where you have this moment of realization. There's no coming back. Your teeth are never coming back. You have lost something forever. I know several people have lost, and I don't know how they stand. Maybe most people don't feel the way I do, but I don't know how you stand tall. You see in a lot of cartoons and movies where people get in a fight and they get a tooth knocked out.
And they spit out.
And they're like, yeah, and then they're friends and they go on a walk. But to me, disfigurement, like a scar or something, whatever, or even a broken nose or something where your nose sets wrong, it can't do worse than that already. But you when you lose something that you will never get back, there's no way you'll get it back. You know what it is? It's this feeling of, maybe this is what it is. I've been talking on the podcast and just thinking in my own life a lot about accepting pain in the last couple of months, right? And avoiding pain, and how avoiding pain has caused all sorts. And I've learned about a new way of avoiding pain, which is really interesting, which is self-recrimination, where you say to yourself, that was stupid, you shouldn't have done that, that was stupid, stupid, stupid. That's actually a way of avoiding pain, because you're trying to undo the event by sort of saying it in your mind, where you sort of keep saying, oh, that was so stupid of me. You have to say, no, I just did this. Like, I stayed up late last night when I shouldn't have. And I was tempted to go, you idiot, you knew this would be bad, you knew this, but it's like, no, you did it, now you suffer. That's it. I'm not going to blame myself. And it's not even now you suffer. It's just go about your day. And if you don't like how you feel, then do differently next time. But don't dwell on it. Don't say, oh, you idiot, don't do this again. Because that's just a way of avoiding pain. And so maybe to someone in my unhealthy mindset of avoiding pain all this time, blaming on others, being spiteful, whatever else, all the codependent or borderline or whatever you want to call it, or whatever it is, strategies, right? Maybe what made losing my teeth so much more devastating than someone else losing their finger appears to be. It's also hard to tell how someone appears versus you feel. But maybe they're just like, okay, I'll accept the loss. I'm not happy, but I'll accept the loss. Maybe I was just trying... Or I guess what I'm saying is, losing my front teeth forced me to accept pain that I've been running from my whole life. Because there's no running from the fact that you've lost like a part of your body, like a chunk of your body. Like, it's kind of like what I was talking about with the plastic surgery last, where you just sort of say, okay, I'm never going to do this again. I'm going to get that nose job and I won't be able to do marathons.
And as you said, it's like the majority of people are satisfied with plastic surgery.
Yeah. And so maybe...
I think it's the same with tattoo.
Yeah.
It's slightly lower, but I think it's still the same.
Well, that's the thing. You always hear parents go on and on about how you'll regret your tattoos. But I've talked to people, like our stepsister, who has done a lot of her own tattoos, and they're fairly crude. And some of them she doesn't really like. She's like, yeah, that one turned out kind of bad. But it doesn't bother her. She's like, yeah, I wish I'd done that one a bit better. But it's like, I don't know, you got a scar on your hand, you're like, yeah, maybe I'd like unblemished skin, but that's what happened.
Yeah, well, so it's not as much, but, and it's hard to see sometimes, my skin's like that, but losing the pigment in my fingers, like, I was in the shower, I was actually really depressed about that, like, a couple of weeks ago, I was just looking at my finger, and it's just like, man, if this, like, just keeps spreading, that'll just be, like, it's a permanent change I don't really have any control over. And, I mean, it's actually not permanent, I was lucky to it, but it was just, like, it's such a minor thing of, like, my skin...
How strong of soap are you? That's like a Dove ad right there.
I was...
Wash away the white man's burden.
Mom was saying, actually, hydrocortisone, like the super stuff. She's saying that's one of the side effects. And it is on those two fingers majority.
I've heard stories about, I think it's Chinese people mostly. They meet a black person for the first time in their life. Like these old, sweet Chinese grandmas, right? And they'll see a little black boy. And they'll wet their thumb and then wipe their face. Like, oh, look at you, you're covered in dust here.
Yeah, but just, like, losing pigment is such a small thing, it's barely noticeable. But still, it's like, oh man, that's happening.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can barely notice it, but it's like...
I'd be more concerned about that.
The shaking?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's like, you can look at it, and it's like, there's something off color-wise in my hands.
Like maybe you're not.
Yeah, well, up there and like this thumb there.
Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. It's maybe, like, you can barely notice, but...
Yeah, most people don't notice I'm missing.
Yeah.
I do have fake teeth there, but there is a line. But it is, it forces you to accept pain, and if you're not used to accepting, that's a very... Like if you cut off a narcissist's hand, that would be a very bad experience for them, unlike a normal person. But I think it might be worse for someone with a cluster B personality.
This makes me think of ridiculous anime where there's the karate master, and there's all these martial art masters who are like these super serious, scary dudes. They have a bunch of criminals who are also super serious dudes basically come and start beating up all the martial art masters. And so like the first bit of it is like all these criminals are beating up the martial art masters. And then it turns out the martial art masters are just getting warmed up and they beat all the criminals. In the case for the karate master, he gets his right hand cut off. And he's like he's screaming, he's in pain. Then he stands up and he punches the guy who cut his hand off in the face with a stump. He says, "I have to thank you for what you did. The human hand is far too soft and full of far too many small bones to ever deliver a proper punch. For years I've been considering trying to strengthen my hands and make them better, a more solid, singular unit. And with losing my hand in one fell swoop, you've solved my problem with punching."
Yeah, he's accepting. That's John Galt right there.
He actually had the hand grafted back on later, but I just love the moment where his hands cut off, and Chris I have to feed you, I cut off your hand. Then he gets punched by the stump, and it takes him down.
I actually wonder you would have to accept pain to such a severe degree if you lost a finger as someone with cluster. Well, I guess you'd just descend into self. But I was curious, could you cure someone?
I don't think.
But I think that you just descend into massive self-pity. But I mean, how will we know if we don't try?
It sounds like lobotomy to fix it.
You could potentially do sound study involves cutting off cluster limb using VR.
I feel like at ethics boards...
They're pretty loose, those ethics boards.
No, they aren't. They are so harsh now.
Did you see Tom Scott did that video where he made people do the trolley problem? Like in real life? He tricked them into thinking they actually had to do the trolley problem in real life?
I thought that was
Maybe it's the Mythbuster. But... anyways, you can do... that seems much more messed up than tricking someone to thinking they've lost a limb.
Tom Scott wouldn't do that.
I thought it was him.
No.
Anyways, that seems way more messed up than pretending to cut off someone.
Well, ever since the experiment where people thought they were electric to death...
Milgram experiments.
Yeah, ethics boards have been a little... iffy on that. Although someone tried to repeat it, I think they got the results.
So I think one of the things why that one's unethical is because... it generates such feelings of hatred within yourself after the...
yeah.
Whereas with the trolley problem one, you're making the best of a bad situation.
Yeah.
And with the limb cutting off one, that's more of a prank. Yeah. That's more of a, gotcha.
Well, actually, you don't even need VR to do that.
Like for Phantom Limb, how they use mirrors and stuff?
Yeah, well, I saw a really interesting one. Like you said with the Phantom Mirror. So the guy put his arm out, and he put on a shirt that his sleeve wasn't in. Then there's a mirror put in place. And then his hand was next to it, and then there was the fake hand there. And so the person was they rubbed both hands with their fingers, so they're doing the action with the same hands. So it felt like the things were happening. Then they stopped with his real hand. They kept interacting with the fake one. Then they swung a hammer down on the fake hand, smashed it, and the guy freaked out.
What was the fake hand? Mannequin's arm or something?
It was a glove. It was like a glove full of paste.
Right. And how did they make the hand move? They had a puppeteer or something?
No, so they put both hands down, and they were rubbing that hand. So the person doing it was running their fingers across a feather across the fake hand and the real hand, and he was looking at the fake hand when the feather was getting rubbed across it. And then they stopped rubbing the feather on the real hand, so it's just going across the fake one.
Right, okay.
So they basically got him accustomed to looking at the fake hand and thinking of it as his own. And then when she hit it with the hammer, he freaked out.
Right, because he was seeing it as his hand with feeling it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's not helping Phantom Limb. That's just messing with someone.
Yeah, it was... this was the phantom effect of where you can give someone association with a fake limb.
This man has no limbs. How do we torture him?
No, the guy had
find a way.
The guy had both arms.
Okay.
He didn't have phantom limb. It was giving him a third arm and making him think it was his right arm.
So could the military, let's say, use this to torture prisoners without leaving marks?
There's a Japanese device, which is a backpack that turns into Dr. Octopus. It's got 2 to 4 arms on it, and it basically links to you neurologically. And you can learn to control them and just basically quickly adapt to it.
Well, I think this is actually really easy to replicate. When you play video games.
Yeah. I've got even one better. Driving a car.
Yeah, you're somatically linked to the object. It's the same experience where you feel one with the machine. And in a video game, if you fall off a cliff on, let's say, even a side-scroller like Mario, sometimes your stomach flips and it feels like you're falling.
And if you're playing VR and you fall off a cliff, that hurts.
Yeah, I've never used VR, but I wonder if it would be... I assume that the imagery isn't actually convincing if you stop and think about it.
Oh, it's not at all.
But given that a controller is enough to make you feel like you're moving the limbs and like the legs and arms of a character in Smash Bros, let's say, it wouldn't take a very convincing illusion to feel like you were there. But I wonder if it's actually more so than like if you fall in Minecraft. I wonder if it's any different a feeling. Are you able to compare? Like if you fall off a cliff in VR, is it different from falling off a cliff in Minecraft?
Your heart leaps in your chest. It feels like fall. Like, you know, if you're like a zip line or like one of those Tarzan swings.
Yeah.
It feels like that.
But it feels like that in Minecraft too for me.
Well, then you might have an actual heart attack.
Or maybe I've already hit the limit.
Yeah, one or the other.
Yeah, fun to find.
You'll be like that guy who's the video of supposed to be like walking across the boards in the VR game. And he's like whimpering and he's crawling across them and he's just like an inch above the floor.
Yeah, I am very curious. Gotta try it. So maybe it'll become... I don't actually know if it'll ever become big or not, but maybe that'd be...
Yeah, I think you saw the joke of Google had that new super expensive headset prototype. Not Google, Apple.
Yeah, the one that projects your eyes onto.
Yeah, and then there's this like, or you could like buy whatever, and Elon Musk posted you could buy $3 of LSD mushrooms for the same experience.
Or you could buy a Quest and stick googly eyes on it.
Yeah.
No, the Apple thing seems like it has some really cool... the only thing is the price is... The price might even be reasonable, but it's like, at that price, nobody's going to use it.
I feel like VR as it is, a lot of people do believe in it, a lot of people don't.
I think the PlayStation 5 VR is probably the best.
I think VR is like a fun side thing if you have some spare money, basically, and you want to play around. Maybe full dive VR might grab people.
I don't know. That's the idea of feel and sense stuff.
You're in a complete virtual world.
Yeah.
So it's like the main thought of how to put someone into that is you hijack the center of the brain for dreaming, and you basically make them have a dream along with other people, and it's all based in one server.
I mean, you can do that already. You just have a sleepover. I've done that.
I don't know if you're having the same dreams.
We compared notes, and we were having the same dream. So
yeah.
I think he's a fairly decent liar, the guy. He was a friend of mine when we were both 7 or 8. We were comparing dream notes. Saying
that's one. The other thing is basically, so yeah, the VR, and instead of like doing the dream thing, it like hooks into your optic nerve, so it makes your optic nerve see. Basically, it's like taking over your nervous system, so the world you observe is not real.
You use glasses. I use.
We're cyborgs.
No, I was just thinking it's possible to look through glasses without things, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think you need to hook into someone's optic nerve. I think just having a screen near the face might be enough fully immersive.
Yeah.
I've heard, like, Thrill Seekers talked about he's felt pain and smelled smells without any things. Or he's worn a suit that gives you, like, this very light electrical stimulus when you would touch something hot or something painful. And the exact same stimulus his body has interpreted as, oh, that's a solid object. Oh, that's a hot object. Oh, that's a sharp object.
I even without that thing, I've had... My setup's really small, so I don't want to punch my monitor, so I'm usually quite cautious. But, like, for the short bit I could play super hot VR. Like, my setup's actually too small to it. But for a short bit I was playing, like, picking up the objects. Like, how the controllers do is you actually have to pick objects by squeezing. That's how they do it a lot of the time. You don't press a button.
Yeah.
And it feels really weird, like you have to squeeze. But I think the feeling, like I said, is I was playing Windlands because my friend recommended, oh, you should play Windlands. Me, an idiot, decided to have that be the first VR game I play. And it's a parkour game with grappling, where there's wall jumping. And I just got so dizzy and sick.
Didn't want to start with, like, Half-Life Alyx or something?
That game... Oh my goodness. I have trouble playing that game because, so the start of the game, like a little bit further on, like the first where you actually start using the gun, you're in a train. Like you drop into this old abandoned train and there's head crab zombies outside the train and they're trying to break in. And I see that they're, like, the graphics are good, but I know there's those head crab zombies are there. And it's so scary.
Yeah, I felt that about Minecraft the first time I found it.
Yeah.
I was hiding under a church in Minecraft, just hearing the sounds of the zombies and spiders outside. It's terrifying.
It's so scary, and I have this gun, and it has a scope for aiming, but it's terrible, and so I have one eye closed and, like, trying to shoot at this... God, like, I think where VR probably does its best is horror game.
Do you think...
Like, geez.
Do you think...
And actually, something really interesting thing. So, Blade and Sorcery.
That's the game I want.
To move, its movement's not the teleport. You have to push down the joystick. And when you're getting used to that joystick, it makes you really sick. Like, just pushing and you move with... Like, that's one of the things that you really feel with VR is if you're not moving, like, if you're not doing the teleport, using the joystick to... It feels wrong. It's like being the car sickness.
Yeah.
It's like that to the nth degree. However, one of the things that they do, which is kind of clever in Blade and Sorcery, is to run, you pump your hands. And so what I was doing with my VR setup is while I was playing Blade and Sorcery, whenever I moved my character, I would jog on spot. And so... And it really helped with the motion sickness, and I don't need to do that anymore. But to start with, I would jog on spot to move.
So you do get used to it, NASA stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, but like the jogging on spot, my body reflecting into that, it's like, oh, okay.
I don't really get seasick or car sick, so I don't know if that'd be an advantage or not. But
well, I'll buy Windlands again and throw you into it.
That'll be my first experience of VR ever.
No, honestly, the first experience of VR should be the Steam
thing. Well, it should be half like Alex in theory, right? That's the sort of Steam's big leading, like, this is what you want.
Yeah, I'd recommend just, like, chilling out in the Steam lounge and lowing in different environments.
I'll see what to at that point. Like, the PSVR, it increases the resolution where you're looking, and then it shrinks it everywhere else.
One of my problems with VR is I think my head is slightly shaped wrong for my device. And so I have light that comes in around my cheeks, and I can see my cheeks and lips, and that really takes me out of it.
Yeah, you can get molds, I think. Like no one's going to be the same. So there is... I think I've seen Thrillseeker actually talk about molds you get.
Because there's like molded goggles, but just something just to cover that up so I can't see down there would be really good to me.
Yeah, I think you can get like foam or something that you have.
I could even have that myself. I have plenty.
Yeah. Or you could use that weird plastic.
Warblism. I would use shaping.
Well, if it was exactly the same shape of your face, it would be
still uncomfortable.
Like if it was exactly the same shape and you didn't move your face whatsoever. Yeah, well, that's kind of the biggest... I can't really use microscopes or... binoculars. I've never been able to. And I find it very frustrating because the lenses don't line up. And I don't know if that's because of my eyes or because I'm bad at you or something.
You're probably bad at you. But
basically, I can't see through them because my field of view is this tiny little crescent sliver. Yeah. Because the lenses are off kilter whenever I use them.
Have to adjust.
Well, it's not that the resolution's wrong. It's that because there's multiple lenses, right?
Yeah.
And so... I'm seeing them, like, you know when your hand's in front of your face, you through your hand?
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of like that, but I see blackness. So I have this tiny field of view when I try to use telescopes.
Even, like, with one eye closed, because...
Yeah, no, I really struggle to look lenses. So, and the glasses make it even worse, because then that's a third lens I have to wear a fourth. Weird. That just made my vision.
Yeah. One of the limiters definitely with VR is I have to put on contacts if I ever want.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. And then wearing bulky headgear. And having wires around me, I think a wireless might be my best. Although I don't want a Facebook. No, that's seriously sharpening my field of view.
He's moving his hands and making a lens.
I'm making a false telescope. It's actually making my vision.
No, it's not false. It's as making it. Lowering the point makes your vision. One of the very early designs of glass is literally just like pinholes.
Putting your hands at your head.
No, it was actually just pinholes. Like without glass, you just have slits or pinholes, and it lowers the view.
Yeah, I've done that. I have basic.
Like that's why people squint to see. Is you actually change your.
Yeah, I've basically
focal length by squinting.
20/20 through my eyelashes, but then I can't. And one thing I can do actually, which I'm sure a lot of people can, but if my eye's watery or I get water in it, if I get the water droplet just right, it's like I have glasses on my, which is basically a contact. Right, well, call it there?
Yeah.